Well, before we get into too much stuff, I wanted to give people a taste of like what our DM conversations are like, because they're pretty much my favorite. And like,
Dude, I'm like, sometimes I'll get a text from you and I'm like, can I engage right now? I don't know, because I can't not give you a one line response. Go ahead.
you're polite.
This is-
Okay, I'm gonna ask you. I'm gonna name a director, and you tell me your favorite movie. Okay,
Oh, okay.
Fincher.
Fuck. Fuck. This is so hard. I It's like Fight Club is kind of like his movie where it's just like balls out. But Social Network just has like a just such a pace and such an amazing thing.
You know what's special about Social Network is he made something incredible out of something you didn't think could be
Yes, that's
incredible.
it. Like, yeah, and he like humanized Zuckerberg, but also like showed you what a spectrum megalomaniac guy he is. But let's just keep this tight. I'm just gonna go Fincher. Fuck. It could change tomorrow. I'll go Fight Club.
Yeah, that's the correct answer.
Okay.
I would have corrected you if
You would have.
you like the DMs.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so Scorsese's your favorite, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
he's
so
yeah.
Scorsese. Favorite
For me,
movie.
it's Raging Bull. Yeah.
Paul Thomas Anderson.
He hasn't missed.
Oh, he has missed.
He hasn't missed. There Will Be Blood.
Right answer again. Coppola.
The Conversation.
You know, by the way, is that right there?
Yeah, I found the set photographer who's a really amazing guy, Brian Hamill. He's like crazy photographer from the 70s and stuff, and I was able to buy some set prints from him.
Just so you know, every movie you've ever told me that you like or to watch or that you
Yeah.
have posted about in your stories, I've
Yes.
actually screenshotted it and I have a list. Like you're like kind of like my mentor in that way.
Oh,
Because
dude, and everyone because we have because I've hurt you a couple times. Um, all yours are there. Like you have a similar gravitas for me, and I just try to chip away at those things because I'm like I have to earn the respect back after destroying you.
oh my god, that thank God you didn't
Keep
say my
keep going.
answer
Okay.
for Fincher. Okay, Oliver Stone.
Oh, JFK.
I I have to go Natural Born Killers, but
Yeah, I
that's
see why.
you know my
Yeah.
personality.
Yeah, the
Um,
irreverence and yeah.
just the freneticness and the craziness and the
Mm.
okay, Malik.
I mean, it's like Badlands and Days of Heaven like get that like but for me, Thin Red Line, for me, like just I saw that 3 times in the movie theater. Tree of Life is obviously very profound, but I just would have to say, in terms of the visceral connection to where I was in my life, it's Thin Red Line.
What was it? You know, I think Malik had been gone for like 20 years.
Oh yeah,
And then he
25
just
years.
showed up
Yeah.
with that. And I read
hmm
something that some of those actors did it for free because they wanted to be in a
hmm
Malik film so badly.
Yeah, I mean, Christopher Nolan gets certain actors at scale, because they sort of know what they're getting into and they want the experience. But like, if Terrence Malick's coming out of retirement, you're not gonna be like, I need to make my payday.
Yeah.
But there's also crazy stories about that film that there's like a 5 hour cut.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember a friend like gossiping with me and saying, they met him and like apparently he never saw the final cut of the movie. Like, his process of making things, when people look at movies, they go, oh, this is what it is. It's so literal. It's so this thing. It's like, the filmmaker's experience, depending on the filmmaker, is going to be so different for them to get to there. So Malick, like the fact that he maybe has not ever seen the actual edit that was his edit of the Thin Red Line is kind of amazing and lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I like about Thin Red Line too is it's the transition movie. Like it has
Mm.
those clips of
Mm.
the wife back home
Yeah.
on the
All the
swing.
the
It has
feelings.
those transcendental like the real
hmm
close up shots of that, and then that became like Tree of Life is almost entirely
Yeah.
made of those little scenes, like maybe
Yeah.
to excess to some people. But
And I think he just, plays minimal number of takes, just feels it, and then moves on,
all right, Nolan.
I mean, at this point, I mean, I really like Memento because of when I saw it and like how I felt about it. But it's Oppenheimer for me. I think it's absolutely his greatest work. Four
Mhm.
times in IMAX for me, and I'm like, if you were like, dude, let's see it tomorrow, I'd be like, let me check my schedule, but I think I can do it.
Yeah, I I've had my balls busted over the years for
Mm,
being that dude that, I've seen Tool over 100 times. I've seen
sure,
the
sure.
amount of times I've seen some movies in the theaters. Um, you know, so to hear you or to see you posting that you've gone so many times, like it's different to like over time see a movie 10 times, but like for
Yes.
you to go 4 times in the theater, I was hyped. I'm like, okay, like I'm
Yeah.
not that crazy. Like you need to digest this. And
It was 4 times in 5 or 6 weeks. I was late to it because of scheduling and I had a shoot, and then I was like, I'm not going to see it in an inferior format. And then I know that Nolan checks his prints at the Universal City IMAX. So that's the best theater to watch his movies in because that's where he watches them. And so I was able to get tickets to Man's Chinese, but Man's Chinese is like a long throw, which means when the screen is still huge, but you're looking down this way, right?
Mhm.
You're looking down at the screen. But at Universal, the screen's here and it's closer. So the Universal screen is probably technically the same size as the Chinese, but the throw is not as far, so it's more immersive. And every time I've seen that movie, I feel a different aspect of what it's about.
Mhm.
And the last time I saw it about with my wife, who's a psychologist, and she was like, I was like, what do you think, babe? And she's like, oh, it's really about empathy. It's really about connecting with someone who's almost impossible to connect with because of their intellect and all these things. And the movie itself was a way of being empathetic towards their inability. He's so technically precise. They're asking him a questions like, was the bomb a success? And he's like, yes, it was a success. And they're like, so it was okay to kill all these people? He's like, I didn't say it was okay, but technically, if you're asking me as a scientist if this was successful, it was. So there's a beautiful complication to it. And of course, it's an allegory for filmmaking and making a movie with a group of people and then a studio just kind of releasing it into the world without your control. So I don't know. For me, it's a meal. And I think from a sensory standpoint, it's so overwhelming that it's just easy to get lost in it. And as you do with Tool,
Mhm.
you love that feeling of being in that show.
I love the idea of being you're witnessing greatness too. Like these
Mm,
guys are the best at what they do. They're an
hmm
extraordinary band. Like well, I won't get into all that, but so sometimes with Tool, since I see them so often, like especially if they do a group of shows, right? I'll
hmm
sw- I buy tickets usually day of aftermarket,
Yeah.
and I switch sides
Mm,
so I can watch like
mm.
I'll kind of spend a night watching the drummer and then a night watching the guitar player,
Yeah, it's amazing.
and it's
Yeah.
like okay, this is sick. Like, and then, when you're on the bass player drummer side, you can see that the bass player during the drum solo, which is like rare these days, he's standing behind the drum kit, like watching, like so into it. Like
Right. Right.
none of the other band members are out there. And it's like,
Yeah.
yo, these guys are friends. Like this is
Yeah.
sick. And you
Yeah.
just, that's why I go so much. I'm happy enough to, if they do one different song.
Yeah. Yeah. But the
It's my favorite
observational.
thing to do is
Yeah.
be at a Tool show.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's like, yeah. It, yeah. My mind is so like, not dark, but it's that creative mind where I sort of spin towards the fatalistic things. And I'm like, oh man, when they do their last tour, like I will feel for you, you know?
Yeah. I
Like
feel that
that's
way
a,
about skaters too.
yeah, yeah. Like when you're watching that stuff, and I was super emotional one time, like when I saw Eyes Wide Shut, and the first time, and I was really emotional because I was like, I was a Kubrick nerd growing up, and I was watching this movie in the theater. He's already dead, and I was like, I'm literally watching. I'm having an experience I will never have again. I'm having it for the first time, right? Because I was never like mature when one of his movies came out.
Yeah.
But I was like a film graduate, was totally into it. And you're watching it. I recounted that for someone for an interview, for a documentary about my friend, and I lost it.
Oh wow.
Full cried like a baby because I was so in the feels of thinking about when we witness things and we're not aware that it's the last time, right? Because those are real things. So much in life you're not aware of the value of the moment until after.
I feel that way about skaters sometimes.
Hmm.
Like sometimes I'm just watching the, let's go back a couple years. Like I'm watching a
Sure.
Dennis Busenitz part, and
Yeah.
I'm like, man, one day like I'm not going to be able to watch parts like this. He's going to retire,
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's a sad thought. And I felt that way with Costin. I felt that way
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
uh, and it's like, but somebody, there's always someone new where you're like, there's that
Yeah.
energy, like,
But those people that we feel that way about are they, you will always use this word tether, but they're like emotional tethers to us, right? Like,
mhm.
so we all got, um, we all got really emotional with Guy's part,
Oh man, yeah, that
when
was the first skate
like
video I cried
we,
at.
yeah,
In Fully Flare.
yeah, like that
I
was
cried.
that was incredible. We all cried because one, we knew, that's where skate videos really are like on the level of true art and true cinema. Or on one level, we're up here in our brains going like, fuck, this guy's had a long road. Then on
Mhm.
another level, we're like, fuck, the skating is undeniable. And then you're like, fuck, the craft of this part is like serving me the meal. I mean, Ty's work on that, for me, it's just one of those moments, right? It's like Greg, with his Dylan Gravis thing that's just
Mhm.
like, what the fuck? And then, I pushed him. I'm like, please just release the HD thing on Vimeo, and he did. And then there's like he's Dylan's pushing, and there's a billboard in the background that kind of Greg didn't notice until watching it now, and
Mhm.
it's so profound. But that's why there's a big part of me that loves talking about skate videos in an emotional way, because I think as skaters we have so many entry points to why it hits us a certain way. We, there are nerds who watch a Rodney part and they go, "Ah, that's my guy," and then there are people that watch a Jamie Thomas who don't give a fuck and they're from nowhere, and it channels those things. So I think like the Dennis thing, it's like a skater who has a style that appeals and has that strength and that thing. And you kind of feel like those guys don't come along that often where they can put it together quite like that, like, and then, someone, an Ave will put out a part when he's older, or just put out like a minute of stuff. And you're just like, fuck, it's so good. As Jerry posted that Dark
Mhm.
Side from,
Yeah.
that park. And it was just like, I just texted him right away, and it was just like, I just appreciate him so much for putting that out there, because I saw Rodney and I saw Jerry, and it made me so full, like, fuck yeah,
Mhm. Yeah. I like, someone like building off the Dennis thing, like
Hmm.
Nick Stan, who rides for hockey. Like
Hmm.
I watch him and I was like, and I'm like, oh my, like this is like a Dennis, an amalgamation of like Dennis and
Yeah.
Ave, and that
Yeah.
fulfills me. You know what I mean? And then I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, this is like, it's
Yeah.
15 years later, but that's fulfilling. Like Tiago to me
Hmm.
was like a modern Keenan. Like he's got that
Hmm.
style of that 90s
Hmm.
style, and that sort of like the pop and the arms, and
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's like a sort of like a not a replacement, but like a a new
A
version.
compliment.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it fills that void, and
Yeah.
but we still have the list to go. Tarantino.
I mean, God, I loved Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I really did. But he hates it when people say Jackie Brown, I guess, because he didn't write it original source material. But I really love Jackie Brown
I
for
never
how
heard anyone
inventive
pick that one.
it was. Yeah, I think Jackie Brown is a really great movie. It's just like really feels really good. De Niro is like so different in it.
Jackie
I'm
Brown's
gonna go
not.
once. I'm gonna go once upon a time in Hollywood.
That's fair. I'm,
Yeah,
I'm Hateful Eight.
yeah, yeah,
I love Hateful Eight.
yeah. It's great.
Um, okay, Aronofsky.
Yeah, I mean, Requiem is pretty undeniable.
And then Kubrick. Is it? It's not. Is it Eyes Wide Shut?
I don't think so. Um, I mean, I think 2001's, his movie in the, like I always would say that like if and I think I may be quoting someone else, but if an alien came to Earth and says what is cinema, you would show the alien 2001 and Apocalypse Now. And I just think 2001 is so inventive and it's so innately creatively pure. Like the ideas that he's tackling about being thrust into this non-dialogue, seeing a pre Homo sapiens species communicate, interact, and then, what has defined mankind, war and killing, and seeing that come happen, and then thrusting ourselves into the future and catching up with all of that, and then dealing with an artificial intelligence that has a similar conviction about something. And it's like, it's to me, it's just absolutely, it's just such a ballsy film. Like no fucking way around saying like, oh, I don't know. It's kind of like, it's like, what do you? It's fucking space. It's slow. It's all these things. It's terrifying. And he's dealing with technology at a time when no one was having conversations about technology, and like it's all what persisted from there. So I think that's like kind of one of his most important films to me.
Space films are always very like emotional, and I
Yeah.
guess it's the puts you in
Well,
your
it's the
place, like
innate
how small you are.
it's
Yeah, isolation
it's the
and like
innate
how small.
isolation, and I would say existentially like being in a void, in a
Yeah,
vacuum, is the most triggering environment that you could be in. Like,
yeah, or
I
the
mean,
or the infiniteness of
yeah,
it. You know,
the scale. What was that woman the other day? That clip was making the rounds. She's like talking about how much space has been documented. And she's like, if you think of all the galaxies in the universe, let's just map it onto all the ocean water on Earth. So as much ocean water as there is the full universe, galaxy, everything. She's like, how much we've documented and discovered is one cup
yeah,
of water. It's like,
that's
that's a lot.
yeah. I thought for the
Yeah.
first time the other day, I got into a space thing in my mind, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
got in. I was like, I'd never really pondered this
Oh God.
infinity. And then I
I
started thinking
yeah.
about it, and I was like, what the fuck? I gotta think
Dude,
about
it's
something else. Favorite Star Wars movie?
it's funny, like Empire Strikes Back is like the one, but just nothing can compare. It's I feel the same way about The Godfather. Like I agree, The Godfather 2 is incredible, but like Godfather 1 is where it's at. And my favorite Star Wars movie is definitely Star Wars. Like I saw it in the theater multiple times over multiple years, and it totally shaped and informed my childhood. Like, yeah,
Favorite actor? Male
fuck.
actor.
Favorite male actor. I mean, I have to say, like Nicholson, in his run in the early 70s is pretty extraordinary. His Five Easy Pieces, you know, um, Chinatown, The Last Detail, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It, for me, like there's a mania there, but there's also this like rage under the surface, and you know, um, yeah, I sort of feel Nicholson-ish, but also Gene Hackman, because of the conversation. Hackman plays lesser roles, but he has a thing where he's so good at being on the wrong side of what you think is the right morality and sort of still pulling you in. And then all the other ones are so obvious, the De Niro's and Pacino's and stuff, but it's really because, the work that they did is so extraordinary.
Female actress.
Gosh, like it goes in so many eras for me with with female actors. I mean, Meryl Streep is just like so transformative. Like everything that she's in, you believe. I mean, when my wife and I watched The Only Murders in the Building, which we really enjoy, and she's just so good at it, good on it this season. Um, Nicole Kidman also is like just a powerhouse and transformative. Kate Blanchett. Um, You know, I was watching an old movie from the 70s, What's Up, Doc, by Peter Bogdanovich, and Barbara Streisand is so insane in that movie, like totally aware, but also so commanding. And Streisand is like a really underrated, really creative genius. She directed, did all this stuff in the 70s that like people don't really know the full totality of how much of an auteur she herself was or is. Um, yeah, those are four, but I'd have to go back to some of the older films. I mean, yeah, I'll stick with those in the modern era.
I find that I have more favorite female actors than male actors. Like, um, I do like Brad Pitt. I like Michael Shannon.
Yeah,
Um,
he's great. I mean, Jessica
but
Chastain is also just like so insane.
yeah, but that's where I was going. Like Kidman, Kate Blanchett, Jessica Chastain,
Yeah,
and then there's ones coming where you're like, they might get to that level of
right.
Kidman, like Anya Taylor Joy, and
Yeah.
who's the other one I was thinking
Well,
of also?
Florence Pugh is like
Yeah,
she's fearless, dude, and she's like in her early 20s. She's already going there.
yeah, Margot Robbie. Like, I mean, maybe it has
Margot
to do with
Robbie in Babylon, there's like those two scenes with the sound scene and then walking onto the silent movie set was one tear, boom, like that.
yeah.
I couldn't believe she didn't get nominated for that role. I was like, but those awards are what they are.
Okay, favorite skate video of all time.
I mean, it's hard. Like they all mean so much to me.
Mhm.
I really love the Dylan Gravis video.
That's a good
I
answer.
really love it, love it, love it. Um, because of the tricks and because of him and partially because of his story, which
Also,
those profundities like resonate for me. But that's just such a tough question. I mean, is it future primitive? Like, I don't know. Like every one of them hit me in a different way. Like, is it questionable because that was like a thing I was a part of, but I also like saw it as a fan. Um,
I mean, that would be a fair pick, even if you weren't a part of it. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, I mean, in
Because if you
video
take Video
days,
Days and Questionable, those are the two
the,
most revered.
but I have some obscure taste, like Danny's extra part in the DC thing, with the
That was good too.
Metallica and like that.
I think I
It's like,
watched that one more than the regular part, to
yeah,
be honest.
yeah, because you were like, what the fuck? and it felt still like skating. It wasn't so jockey that it was like took you completely out of it. You were like, fuck, dude, this dude's doing a fucking nose blunt slide on this rail, heel flip lip slide. Get out of here. Yeah.
The Dylan part also was the first singular part. Well, it's still the only singular part to have that impact. You know,
Yeah.
think about it. Like,
Well,
even before he passed away, like, there were singular parts, and there was plenty of singular parts after, and there still are, and nothing has even come close.
I think that comes down to two things, very like easy to talk about. It's the taste of the skater and the taste of the filmer, you know? And so Greg is a filmmaker. He looks at things with story and meaning and substance and um, symmetry and alignment and all of that, right? But then when you're filming, you're at the mercy of whatever you're filming or the spot or the time of day. So you can't perfect those things. And then Dylan innately had incredible taste as a skater. So the tricks he was doing, the way he was doing them, the brashness in which he approached it, and that like synthesis is what makes a part that stands the test of time, because you're not just reacting to the moment, you're going a little bit deeper than say, oh, let's just film. You know, people have asked me over time, well, do you want to film skating again? I was like, I would 1,000,000%, but I would totally curate it. I would totally say, no, let's only film this spot at night. Let's only wear these clothes. Let's, you know, do things that like have a sense of design to it so that it's watchable multiple times and you see more things. And I think, you know, like Ryan and Mason's relationship, you know, chips away at some of that stuff, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I think Mason is a really powerful skater and Ryan's really devoted to filming him and capturing stuff, and they get at it. It's just different eras and different spots and different feelings, you know, but I think that when you really get calculated about something, and the Dylan part felt more calculated than anything than other things at that time, aside from what Ty was doing, with all due respect to everybody. Although, you know, the Stay Gold video, I really love that first video. It was fucking great. I was invited to that premiere and I really loved it. Love that energy, that everyone pushing in the beginning and the way the parts opened. John did such a great job
That
with
video
that.
is pretty heavy. And
Yeah.
that Andrew part is,
Yeah. Yeah.
I watched it recently. That Andrew
Yeah.
part is fucking ridiculous.
But I think great parts and parts that kind of stand the test of time. Like, I think if you're like a young filmer and it's like, like be distinct, you know? And because I would also argue that, like, you know, Bill's videos, like Cherry is a really kind of amazing, fresh, out of nowhere video. And I really liked Blessed. Like,
Well, hold on.
yeah.
I'm going to get into Bill. Like, he's
Okay.
literally next on the list.
Uh-huh.
But let's finish these favorites.
Sure.
Peralta. Is that Future
Yeah, I
Primitive?
mean, Future Primitive, I think, is like, I have, like everything, I have very strong opinions about the Powell videos being anthropological documents that are integral to our culture.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Future Primitive is like so raw and so expressive and like really captures skateboarding and culture at a moment that is like worth savoring and going back to, you know. So for me, it's Future Primitive is Stacy's, you know, my favorite work of his.
Greg Hunt. Dylan part?
Yeah, the Dylan part, it's a wrap. Yeah.
Ty.
You know, I mean, Fully Flared is like really, really special. That's when I met him. He was living down the street from my office, and we had kind of known each other, and he clearly knew of me when I was coming up, and we never connected until like 2006 or 2007,
Oh,
when
wow.
my office was like right down the street from him, and then I love it when I meet filmers, and particularly if they know my work or know certain things. And so we would talk, and he's like, "What did you do here?" And I was like, I explained a structure that I was doing with like Jeremy Ray's part
Mm-hmm.
for Secondhand Smoke, and then in Fully Flared, he used the same editing rhythm with Mark Johnson, with a downbeat and a negative space filling with the skate sound. And it was like, I saw it. I don't know if I've ever shared this before, but I was just like, that just sparked me, because I love, and you have it in cinema all the time, but I love in skate videos, if there is a tether back to what sparked that person, and we were having a lot of conversations about making those videos. And of course, I, I made Secondhand Smoke in like a ridiculously short amount of time. So I remember telling him that, and he'd heard that for the first time, and he was like, editing, Fully Flared for a year or whatever. Not that long, but he was in the trenches, and it was just cool to see someone so talented do something so great.
So, last one. So favorite Strobeck.
I mean, it's interesting, right? Because Cherry is sort of that like fresh voice, chaotic statement that didn't go completely under the radar, but like wasn't as celebrated in the moment, or because I just think like where we were with social media was like slightly different, right? Where, I don't remember that there were like Cherry billboards around LA, but I know there were blessed billboards around LA, and so
Also Supreme's first video. I
yeah,
think probably maybe the skate community was
yeah. But everyone who
apprehensive, and
was,
then,
I mean, I remember Mikey talking about it, like, that's where it's at. That's where it's at, dude. Those parts are sick. There's no parts.
yeah, it was rad.
But
Black and white.
yeah, just, I think like I love Bill, even before I ever met him in person. Like, I love his spirit. I love his essence. And now we finally have spent a little bit of time together. I invited him over to watch raw footage, and I send him stuff when I see things that I think he'd be inspired by, that I filmed in my library a long time ago, that remind me of him. He films the people on the street the way I did. He reminds me a lot of Mike Ternasky in the way that he like champions kids, and he really like looks at everyone for who they are. And I think that is really, that's kind of core to what makes skateboarding great. Is I think at its core, if it's skateboarding's right, you're sort of like, you just are celebrated for who you are. And like with skateboarding, who you are can appeal to so many different people, from your aesthetics to your style to all those things. And I feel like as a storyteller, of someone who captures the culture of skateboarding, he puts people in these videos that other people would be like, there's no business giving that guy a part. And then he gives them a part, and everyone goes, yeah, whatever. And then all of a sudden you see people fucking slapping into a wall ride, or, doing some weird, crazy off terrain down a dirt thing. And I think of Aiden and, and those things, and those skaters, and people kind of being celebrated for being different, which is core to skateboarding. And even though Mike Ternasky is like looked at on a plan B level, he was like a real equal opportunity employer. Like, he really celebrated who you were, and he saw you, and then tried to do whatever he could to put you in a position to be successful. And I just think of Tyshawn and Dylan in that clip, and it's like, what more needs to be said about the guy that was holding that camera to get that clip?
Hello, buddy. Yeah.
That's the real deal, is that filmers are holding the camera. Sometimes they're instigating the moment to happen. And it's not that they deserve credit for it, but they should be given credit for capturing the culture, and allowing the meaning to be absorbed more clearly. And I feel the meaning of the skating in Bill's work on a profound level.
Bill's probably my favorite for like two reasons, to build on what you were saying before. He's got an interesting, he sees things in people, and he sees how maybe the world will react to them. But he's also tastemaker enough to make them, like he's got
Yeah.
himself in Supreme, for example, or Violet, to where those things are so influential that it helps blow that
Yeah.
person up.
And it's innate to him.
Yeah.
Like he's not trying in the way that people think of
he's
trying.
Not talent scouting.
No. He's emotionally responding to the human and to the skater. And if he feels that spark, he's all in.
Yeah, because like the just for an example, like the focus he put on Ben,
mm-hmm.
You know, like Ben might have been overlooked in that era of like how he dressed, how he looked. Like to me, Bill captures, you know, I'm from Jersey, like right outside of New York City, and like nobody captures the feeling of skateboarding in New York.
Yeah.
Or even skateboarding on the streets, like just being out in the streets to me than Bill. You know?
Yeah. We're aligned on this front, and there was that recent video that he put out just, you know, with that China trip, and you know,
Piggy.
Yeah, when I was watching Piggy, I was like, there was a way that he was like, you know, he finds things, but then he'll be like really close to someone doing something stupid, and that's all my raw footage before I started to really ramp up for Plan B. Like I would just point it at everything, I would just film it, and it would just feel so. I get really excited when I watch modern skate videos that feel like you're in the session. And he just has an instinct of knowing how to double up the edits, how to tease something the right way, so you feel the session. And again, you know, to the Tyshawn kickflip, where I mean, I don't know if there was a conversation about it that was that big, but people were like, why that angle? It's like when you see the normal angle, that's the typical angle, you're like, eh. Yeah. But when you see that close up from behind and you're like, oh, you felt something. And this goes back to what I was saying about great videos. It's like, if you're chasing that feeling, the video is going to be more timeless, you know?
Yeah. And I also found it interesting that you've sort of called out Bill and Ty as your favorites, and they're also easily the most criticized skate.
Yeah. But both those guys are criticized because everyone bit what they were doing. And so they had some formulaic thing because they have a process and they have a voice. So like, it's really easy to be reductive of Scorsese. You know, the Hughes brothers did it with their early work to great success. You know, Menace to Society, you know, is taking a lot, you know, from Goodfellas and from Scorsese, like in a great way. So, you know, but then you go, oh, well, Scorsese's doing this and he's so gimmicky with his camera, and it's like, but it works and you feel it and it translates a thing. And then over the long tail of a career, if you really pay attention to that and you stumble across a movie like Silence, where it's literally a refutation of everything he's done prior, you see the artistry of it. So I think that those guys are really committed, and in some instances, particularly with Ty, people who don't skate understand his videos really easily and feel them really easily. And that's not a bad thing, that he has the ability to communicate to a broader audience. And then I just think with Bill, you know, he's been so mimicked, and people are just mimicking him. They're not doing it because of what he shows. I imagine he shows up to the session, he starts filming, and he's just filming what he's interested in. Whereas the other people show up to a session, they're filming the way Bill films. Mm-hmm. Right? So when Scorsese does that zoom in and that move over, what he's trying to create a rhythm. So if someone just uses the move in and they don't have rhythm of shots around it, it sticks out in a sequence. But when he saw that scene, he was like, oh no, we need to come in like this and like that. And then when someone does the the cocaine snort and they're pulling in. It's like, oh, it worked because it was designed, with a moment. So I don't know. It just goes into intent and how people end up, applying that. And the same way with film storytelling, with skateboard storytelling, if it's motivated by a feeling, it's going to communicate something. And I think making great work is about communicating a feeling.
I like that Bill is resourced enough to be able to use good music. Like
Hell yeah.
That's such a privilege, for him,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure. And but like if you were to ask me today, like if you were to ask me today to show a video to somebody, like what is skateboarding, right?
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't skate, I would probably show them Blessed, like
Mm-hmm.
at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm like, this is it.
Yeah.
Maybe the clothes are a little weirder than some people prefer or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
to me, that's it,
I totally agree. There's something for everybody in that video.
I was just thinking about the serendipity of your trajectory. Like you're just a regular kid freaking out over Star Wars, going to see it a million times.
Mm-hmm.
You're making stop motion Lego movies.
Yeah.
You're imitating C-3PO with your dad. You've got the timing of the technology, like video cameras are actually available at your age. And you get to skate camp and Ternasky's doing this production of skate videos and they've got the huge camera and you're just there, right? And you're helping. And it doesn't happen like that for everyone. Like it can, but there's such a serendipity to how much you took to film when you were 5 years old or 6 years old, and then that trajectory of film being around you and you being around film and then becoming a filmer and a director.
Yeah.
It's kind of magical,
It is purely magical. There is something bigger than yourself that is at play with that design of a person's narrative and life. And I was thinking about this recently because I've been in ways, I was an early bloomer severely. And then in other ways, I've been a late bloomer. I feel that I've always in my brain seen amazing things happening in life. I've always been a dreamer from a daydream, like this would be cool. And then it would happen. I simply don't know why those things happen. Like I have an autograph photo from Harrison Ford. And when I was a kid, I was a member of Bantha Tracks, which was the Star Wars fan club. And at one point, I wrote with my mom a letter to Harrison Ford asking for an autograph. And I got an 8x10 photo of Harrison Ford in the mail that is legit autographed. And it's like, wow. And I got that in like 1978. And it's like him standing next to Millennium Falcon. I've never seen that photo really published before, but I got it. And I go to myself, how
then too?
What's that?
He was busy back then too. It
Yeah.
wasn't like he had nothing going on.
Yeah. But it was like I was one in 20 million kids who loved Star Wars, and but I wrote the letter and I did the thing. So I think there's something in that journey where I said yes to those moments, and I said yes, creatively. And I was curious, and I remain curious. So I grew up, I'm into Star Wars. I watch it all the time. The way that my brain works, I start cataloging everything. I learn all the actors. I collect the cards. I am a member of the fan club. I learn that they made the models with stop motion things. So I start doing stop motion animation. And now I'm a kid who can talk about those things. And then, my dad has a camera and he's shooting things, and I am curious about that camera. So I start shooting things. And
there's a proactiveness to it, like that. Not to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Even though I do.
No, it's
kids have come into my DMs for years. Like, how do I become a writer, or how do I do what you do? And I'm like, or I don't know any pros. And I'm like,
Yeah.
did you ever just like write them a message and ask if you could interview
Yeah.
them? Like there's an extra step that I think separates the you
Yeah.
or the me from making it. And the average kid who doesn't, like, take skate camp. I know you got a thought. If I was at skate camp, I might have just been like, I just want to skate. I might
That
not
was,
have grabbed that camera, you know. And there's like, you've talked about being present, and
yeah.
but I bet most kids wouldn't have wanted to do that because they're there to skate, and there's
Yeah.
decisions, and there's what are the opposite of decisions, like deciding what you want to do and not do, that brings you to those serendipitous trajectories, right?
So I've always had a tenacity and a drive to do that thing, to
Yeah.
to pick up. So like when I broke my arm, I'm not leaving skate camp. Like that's not like, I'm not the kid who's like, yeah, I'm gonna go home and be. I'm like, no. And then Mike's like, I don't know, maybe we can give you something to do. And maybe I said, I'll help you film. Maybe I said that. I don't think I did, but I was certainly there and made myself present so that when it was like, hey, we'll film, I'll help.
Yeah.
You know, my dad always told me as a kid, like, there's the only bad question is the one you don't ask. And then he always taught me the worst thing someone can say is no. Now, when you get older, you kind of learn some of the social boundaries. But one of the things that it's like not a secret thing, but like people love to help people. They love it because it feeds their self-worth to know that they could be bettering the life of someone else, which is a selfish way to look at it, but it's true from a human nature standpoint. So if I say, hey, Rob, I'd love to interview Maynard, Bob, or whatever, whoever it was, you'd be like, oh, I'd be stoked if I helped Jake do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and so I think people undervalue that social connection that you have to push through to kind of move it forward. And for me, it wasn't about kick flipping down the stairs. It was about being relentless with my camera and saying, oh, can I take photos of you? Oh, what's your address? I'm going to
Yeah.
send you
The
photos.
sending of the packages was, you know,
That's a wrap. Like
that was something where I realized, like, okay, you had an extra oomph to you that really paid off, because you may not have even known you were networking or
I
paying it
just wanted
forward.
them to like me.
Yeah.
I just wanted them to get something from me and want to talk to me again.
Yeah. And I did so much work for free. You know, writing doesn't pay the bills, you know, unless you're Chuck Palahniuk or Stephen King.
Yeah.
And I did so much stuff for free. I mean, I didn't get anything for We Are Blood,
Mm-hmm.
you know, or, but it's like, I don't know. I wrote a Kate Blanchett interview once for someone else that did the interview.
Yeah.
Like, and I was like, holy shit. Like, just to think that I helped an editor do that was cool. But also to know that Kate, who I have the hugest crush on, was answering my question. Like, that was good enough. I didn't need a credit. There's another thing too, because we're the guys who wanted to be pro or sponsored. Like, every skater wants that, right? And then at some point you have to be self-aware enough, you know, not delusional enough to be like, I need to learn a skill or stay in school or go to college. Like, I was sponsored and competing on the East Coast, but then so was Tim O'Connor and Bobby Puglio and the Cardona brothers. And I was like, fuck, like, I'm not like these guys.
It's not me. Yeah.
And I was in college and I was like, I'm going to stay here. And when I started doing good towards the end, because all my classes were English and writing based, which was my strong point, I'm like, I'm going to go to grad school, you know?
Yeah.
And then Tim ended up helping me anyway, because Tim was like hitting up Mesa and Newsom, Ted Newsom. And he was like, my boy has been skating, but he's also got a master's in writing and he wants to write. And the easiest part of my career was getting the email addresses and the attention of those editors. Like, and I'll admit it, like, that was the one silver spoon I had, you know.
Yeah.
But there was
Yeah.
hard work before that. But I just
Of
grew up
course.
one town over from Tim, and I spent my entire age 17 to 25 driving him around because he had no license and he had to film video parts, and he
Yeah.
was my friend.
Yeah. And at
and when
that
he
point,
did
he'll
one
do
thing,
anything for you.
yeah, and he wasn't, no one's even thinking of it that way. It's like, oh, you
But
need to
but
get in
that's what
touch
I
with
mean, is
Nathan.
that it becomes like, yeah, of course.
I found this quote from another interview. Because of waiting for lightning, I was in the mindset that I didn't want to say anything in skateboarding. And I'm paraphrasing here. I realized that I have a lot of things I still want to say and express.
Well, I think at this point, a lot of it has been, more conversations and more talking about some of, the that DNA and connectedness and being a filmer in skateboarding and being, sort of that, first generation modern street filmer, but second, third generation skateboard filmers. Like there's there's the Mac Dogs and the Tony Roberts and the Stacys that all paved the way for that modern era that I'm a part of, but I'm still in that smaller group of the Dan Wolfs and the Aaron Mezas and myself and
You were in the most
Socrates and
revered era.
Tim Dowling.
We're
I think
currently the most revered era. Right?
I have no metric of that, and the 120 people on skate Twitter who are stoked, but I just think that I think that because I just ended at Secondhand Smoke, kind of really, I think there's a cool niche to like being a part of this very compact era. So I feel fortunate about that. But what I would say about what I wanted to say in skateboarding is, I think Waiting for Lightning, I'm obviously made a film on Danny, and I've known Danny since he was a little kid, and I've also known Danny through Mike Ternasky's eyes, which is also a way for me to know myself through Mike Ternasky's eyes, because Mike played a similar role in my life that he did in Danny's life. And I think that, one of the aspects of Waiting for Lightning that's sort of like, it's in the film, but it's not as like forward punching first, is just sort of like the complexity of the, healing aspects that skateboarding can have on trauma, and the um, the way that skateboarding is very complicated for people who are a part of it to be able to get out of it, right? Like there's an aspect of Waiting for Lightning that's very dark about a guy like Danny who has increased the stakes and the scale of what he's doing because he's not satiated anymore, and he sort of destroys himself in the process of doing it to have this really cathartic, complete feeling experience of doing that act of skateboarding. So that to me was like incredibly fascinating. And I think there's a lot of skateboarders who skateboard at a scale and at an intensity that tells you a lot about what they have inside of themselves. And then adjacent to that, you have people like myself, who have significant trauma in their childhood, who found this thing and are kind of nourishing themselves in a similar way to the skaters who are actually doing the things. And then if you macro out of that, I think there's this beautiful conversation about the fact that a lot of skateboarding is a lot of, displaced people in pain who are connecting, in this middle layer that serves them both. And so I like having a platform to talk to people intelligently about these things, because this conversation around mental health is very relevant, because now more than ever, it's more validated, it's more discussed, it's more in the zeitgeist. And I think the better we understand our own stories and those underpinning narrative, and emotional components, the easier it is to connect with people, right? Because we know that connecting and talking about it is a means of processing it and a means of working through it. So what Waiting for Lightning opened up for me was a little bit of that beginning dialogue about trauma and skateboarding, and looking at it in one way through a very, big grand scale character, but then the underpinnings of me, of Mike, um, allowed access to that I was like, I'd like to keep talking about that.
I want to get into that in 1 minute, but I did have one specific waiting for lightning question. I walked out of the theater with it at the premiere.
Great.
And didn't get to it on Weekend Buzz. It wasn't the right place, but I spoke to you earlier about the current project I'm working on, and there's some really tough questions I had to ask. Not because I knew they would get answered or even maybe make the film, but because I needed to just do it to, like, out of responsibility, maybe. You guys left the Swindell incident out of the documentary. Was that like a conscious choice? Was that something that was on the table, and then you
absolutely
decide?
Absolutely. Like,
talk about that a little bit.
Sure. It was an absolute conscious choice. And I think a lot of it had to do, not a lot of it, I think all of it has to do with honoring the gravity and the intensity of that situation and of that victim. And Josh was incarcerated at the time. I was speaking to him through a burner phone. I was writing letters to him. I actually have a very strong relationship with Josh, a very good relationship with him. I'm incredibly proud of the maturity that he has, the work that he's done on himself, both in prison and getting out of prison. And at that time, there was no way to do an interview with Josh and get into that story without it becoming the story. And there is an aspect, not an aspect, that story is more Josh's story than Danny's story. So when you're telling the story of a life and you have this incident that is misperceived by a vast majority of people because they don't have all the information, they haven't read the court transcripts, they haven't spoken to the people who were incarcerated and understand the charges and how the process happened and the fact that, people are questioned and all of those things. And when you arrive at that conclusion of what information you have to share and how that could be wedged within the story, and knowing that it shouldn't be wedged out of honoring someone who was killed in an incredibly tragic and disgusting manner, it doesn't have a place in that story. And we knew that by not putting it in, people would say, oh, they didn't talk about this. But that is what it is. That's part of what Danny himself has to discuss at some point if he feels like wanting to discuss it. Josh has discussed it very openly. And I've had a ton of conversations with Josh about it. But if I can't sit Josh in a chair and ask him the questions and have him say it out loud, then I'm projecting something into Danny's story that's not from the authors of the people who were inherently involved. And so my hope is that in time, as Josh tells more about his story, and if Danny decides to tell about his story, then, that situation could be understood better. But, for me, I have my feelings about everything that I read and everything that I discovered. Carol, my editor, and I, and Brett, my writer, and I, we all went through it, and we all are like, that's a stain on Danny's legacy simply because it hasn't been discussed. It's only been discussed by the fringe and the triggered, and the rightfully so triggered because of all these motifs and language surrounding that stuff, but also because if you never talk about something, then people just kind of spin the narrative that they want.
They assume the worst too. They assume it's being swept under the rug.
And so I feel that story is Josh's story to tell. And in the movie of what Danny's relationship to skateboarding and that cycle that I talked about earlier, that darkness of that cycle, but that also has the enlightenment, there's an Icarus, aspect to that. And also, what's the Oppenheimer, the Prometheus, right? It's
Oh yeah.
a similar thing, right? So I hope that is clarified at some point, but not to satisfy the fringe people who are like, I want that nasty info. It's like, I hope that more of that story is told, because I think it sheds light on what I was talking about earlier, which is the trauma and some of the elements that are innately inside a lot of people in skateboarding. And it's not my place to talk about their stuff, but I'm always happy to talk about my stuff.
I mean, I was at the premiere and I walked out of there and I was like, that was amazing. Because I also worked at DC around the
Yeah.
time that Danny jumped the Great Wall. And so we were doing like marketing and stuff.
Yeah.
Were you there for the jump?
Nope.
I know. I was going to ask you what the gnarliest thing you ever saw done was on a skateboard. And then I'm like, I don't think he was at the Great Wall.
No. I mean, you know, he did. I was in Kauai and I filmed him 360 flip that Euro step up on his super mega ramp. But prior to that, you know, Duffy's lip slide on that kinked post office rail in Marin is the gnarliest thing I've ever seen anyone try. That was just like,
that was you and Lee were talking about that on Weekend
Boys,
actually.
That was like just stupid crazy. Like he's like, I want to do that. I'm like, okay. I still am trying to find that raw tape. Can't find it yet.
Yeah,
but,
I noticed you're not lately. You're not posting as much like old footage, and you're not as active. And is that are you just busy, or
you know,
it's
twofold. I mean, I started my That Was Now account to kind of like really push a lot of that material to that one platform, because then people can go right there and get it.
Okay.
Part of it is I've actually been sharing a lot of footage with people who are working on stuff. So, you know, that This Old Ledge show, I'm trying to send those guys a lot of footage. Other people have been asking for other footage. So I have been in the vault and I have pulled stuff, but it's dangerous in a way, because I really do have these current projects that I'm really trying to push myself to do. And then because of the weight, you know this, when all the emotion flows through these things, when we have these really heavy ties, the moment we dip into those waters, we don't want to get out. And then when we're in those waters, we're actually not moving other things forward. So I just have to be more disciplined.
Is there a fear of giving away the last of it? Like, okay, this is the last of the Rick Howard footage. I'm not saying that's happening, but
yeah,
at some point there's no more Dylan footage, right?
No,
and at some point there might not be any more Javante or what. So like, do you ever post the last thing you have and to be like, oh, that was it, I have no more of that gold mine?
I think that's a great thing. Great question, because there is a feeling of understanding the feeling that you want people to feel like there's still more. Mm-hmm. But that's not a conscious thing for me. It's more just like, oh, I want to put it all out at the right time or whatever. Like in the big picture, like I do want to put all my footage out there and just have it all available. But the amount of work that it would take me to do that, to do it right, so that you could go to a site and go, I want to watch all Carl Watson's footage that Jacob shot. Mm-hmm. I want to watch all Jason Adams footage. I want to watch all Salman footage. I want to watch. That would take a long time. And I'm not necessarily trying to get over on it and make a ton of money off of like some raw footage site. So there's a little bit of not diminishing returns, but that becomes more of like a real legacy thing, that like, do I need to take this moment in time right now where my creative horsepower is in such a way to do that? Or can I, in tandem with some of these other projects that I hope to do, can I just make sure that I couple that with that? And then maybe if I can hire someone to go and sit and pull some of that stuff, it helps. But right now it's just me.
Yeah.
You know,
I was thinking too, I'm going to make an assumption with this statement, but perhaps the Gabriel Rodriguez tribute isn't as special if you've already posted everything. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to assume there's stuff in there that was never seen, probably, or you never posted.
The majority of it was never seen because
so
he was on PAL.
Yeah. Had you thrown that out there for Raw Footage Fridays or something, that tribute would have been very different.
Yeah. that tribute was super emotional for me. And that was, something that I edited, and, I really wanted to do something for the viewing and the service. And so I collected a bunch of footage from people and talked to Rudy about some of his favorite music. And then I was thinking about it, and I was like, oh, I just want to do it all backwards. I just want to start with the newest stuff and then see this guy and then make it go back to the first things to see where
Yeah,
it
that's cool.
started.
Are there any unreleased parts or videos that you know of from that era? The World Blind 101.
I mean, some skate nerd is going to know, this better than me, but there's a Plan B trade show video
Oh wow.
that I don't remember what is on it or what's in it. And I'm not sure if it was 91 or 92. Um,
And you don't have it?
what else? Uh, I mean, what else?
I mean, I remember, there was
Yeah,
rumors of
there's,
the blind video that never came out.
I mean, there's, on, on, on some of those tapes, there's like sketches of parts, and there's, I mean, I have the virtual reality small screens as, full screen playouts, right? But there's no, like, at least in that era, there was the only thing that, and it's super skate nerdy, was like the venture video that I made with Greg
Right.
Carroll, which is all like sponsor me tapes and footage
Yeah.
from people all over the country. There's no, I'm just trying to think, like, there's no like blind video that
Yeah.
wasn't the
Yeah.
thing. I mean,
But
there's
that was the
Danny.
rumor forever,
Yeah.
that there was a
There's,
missing blind video,
I mean, and again, there's like, is there Danny footage from Blind? Yeah, for sure. I don't know if it's enough for a whole part, but there's a lot of Europe footage of him, and then there's stuff, from, like, was it Risk It, right? He's skating for Blind when Tony made Risk It. So
How'd you feel about Revolution when it came out?
when Revolution came out, I was completely disconnected from Plan B. Like, the reality was, I made Secondhand Smoke, and I asked for royalties. I didn't ask for any money. I just asked for, give me like a,
Mhm.
I don't know how much it was, but I was like, I just want to make royalties. So if I've done a good job and the video is successful, then I get paid. If I didn't and it's not, then I don't get paid. And they said no. So I said, okay, then this is the fee. And I think they paid me like a third of it. I think it was $7,000 I asked for making Secondhand Smoke, and I think I got paid 2 or 3, and I was in college, and it was Andrick and Mary, Mike's widow, and I didn't feel like the asshole to call and ask them to pay me the rest of that money.
Mhm.
So,
Which isn't even being an asshole.
right,
Right.
but when you're psychologically wired
Mm-hmm.
through your childhood to deal with
Or,
confrontations a certain way,
or the skate
you
industry
yeah,
is
I
just
mean, it's just,
wires you that way too.
yeah, like, it's like, as a filmer, you can't ask for more money. So they didn't pay me. So in a way, it was like persona non grata. Like, I just felt totally disconnected from the brand. I felt, I love Mary, and by the way, like, I still went to Michaela's like first and second birthdays after I wasn't paid, and Mary would apologize. I'm sorry, Jake, we're just struggling, or blah blah, whatever excuse it was. It wasn't like didn't have it. But I think after that, I was like, oh, like, my guy's dead. I made this video for me, which I did, and for him clearly. But at that point, it was like Revolution came out. I'm like, who fucking cares? Like,
Yeah.
it's not good. It's not. It doesn't have the spark. Like what Mike tried to do with videos, and what I learned through him, which I had a little bit in me before him and I were working directly, and then what I tried to do with the videos, that wasn't happening anymore. It turned into, this is cool, but to make a great skate video, you have to love the person that you're making the part for.
Yeah.
Like,
I
that's
also
why,
think,
yeah.
go on.
Well, that's why, like, Ryan and Mason, like, clearly, like, that's, you feel it. That's Greg and Dylan. You feel it. Ty and Guy, you feel it. Like Mark and Ty, as contentious as those things are, you feel it. You go, you're the filmer, and you're editing this, and you're like, fuck, dude, I just want people to feel what I feel when I see that guy skate. And it's just music and editing. Yeah.
Revolution and being like, why is this so different? Like, you could just feel it. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, I may not have been in the mix enough or privy to the information enough to know why it was like it was.
Yeah.
But I could tell that, the soul was gone. And
yeah. And it's, by the way, like,
it was like they would try to do elements of what Mike did.
Yeah.
But it falls flat. It's like a bad cover band or something.
Yeah. And again, solid work, some great skating. I just emotionally am like not connected to it at all.
What do you think Secondhand Smoke would have been like if Mike was there for it? Like, how would it have been different?
I think it would have been longer, because I think more skaters would have gotten more tricks. I've never been asked this question.
Good.
Part of me wants to say that I think it would have felt the same. Like, I am actually really proud of that video, and I'm really proud of like some of the undertones in it, like Duffy skating, to Vince Giraldi, because his skating at that point is a little underwhelming. So it's like, we're not trying to oversell it,
the music made it lighter, way lighter.
Yeah. And I tried to use some music that we had talked about using in virtual. So there was a connection there. And then I feel like the Danny part as like a little bookend at the end is actually strong enough to be what it is. And then
Danny
of course,
was dealing with his injury.
He had one of those big neck injuries, and while I was editing it, we were filming the vert stuff, the big backside ollie kickflip and the cavalier heel flip. We filmed that together during the process of me editing it, and then it was always a given that he would have like the credit part. But I don't know, like, I think, like, I know Mike's proud of the Jeremy Ray part. I know Mike's like, yeah, that's the fucking part, and when Mike and I made virtual, he gave me the keys. Like, I feel like Questionable is very, very much Mike Ternasky's video, and I supported that video, and I was a part of it, and I cut a number of parts in there, not the big parts, but smaller parts. In virtual, it's almost impossible for me to like go in my brain and go, what part did Mike edit from beginning to end? Because it didn't really happen. He would sit in the room and sort of give me some guidance. And then in some cases, I would just go and then present to him. And then we'd sit together and we'd refine and fine tune it. So based on how Mike and I had talked about our relationship going forward after virtual, I would have come home from college and I would have edited Secondhand Smoke with him supervising me. That was the plan. Like, I got into film school. I'm going to go to film school. Then Jake, you'll come back and edit the snowboard videos and the skateboard videos for me. Yeah. So again, I think it would have been very similar. He probably would have picked a couple better songs than me, but
who over your skate career was your favorite and least favorite to film with?
Like, Cardiel was such like just a moment in time, and there's like an aspect of filming with Cardiel where like I felt a little bit like a Jane Goodall, wildlife documentarian, like Greg Carroll and I are going up to Lake of the Pines up by Tahoe, and we're fucking literally, we get there at night, and then the next day we go to this school by his house, and he's just fucking skating so hard and slamming, and then it's too hot to skate, so we go to a fucking water hole, and then we go to this mini ramp, and then we go to this other. So there was an aspect of filming Cardiel where the energy was just so wild and feral and like,
I was going to use that word.
it was just so like violent, but not bad violent, it was so like, you felt it in your whole body. And I've talked about this moment a number of times, but he 180'd this gap that's like, was stupid big. And I remember like almost crying because he was so stoked and we were so stoked. So I think like Cardiel, really was that like beautiful thing for me to like feel that primal. That's it, primal. It was very primal to film him at that moment of time, because tricks weren't so hard that you weren't landing stuff. So you were, and then of course, like Rodney was like really this exercise in sort of patience and precision and presence. You really had to focus and make him feel like you were there with him and supportive and know when to talk and when not to talk. And are we going to go and come back and not? So there's an aspect of filming with Rodney where the reverence is so high and you feel so fortunate to be there. And then, he lands something that's never been landed before. And you feel, because you've grown up with him as an author of everything that you've fucking done, you're like, oh, wow, we got something that hadn't been done. And really with Rodney, it was like that. So there's an esteem and a prestige with Rodney that was really incredible. And then Duffy would, Pat was so open to trying things. And Rick is just so good to watch. And Mikey was the best of both worlds. I don't really remember anyone that I filmed that I was like, fuck, this sucks. Like, I hate this. I mean, it got contentious with Mikey at the end. I think I've talked about that ad nauseum, but like, it just wasn't fun for us. And I think we knew each other for so long, but it was never like, oh, this is boring. I think I just have been, spoiled in that way. Like even filming Danny Sargent for New Deal, I'm spending hours with Danny Sargent and picking him up from his house after he did who knows what the night before. And I'm like, I feel like this guy's like 35. Like that's the generational thing in skating. He's probably like 3 years older than me. And just going around San Francisco with him in my car and filming. And like, I don't know. I don't have I really can't remember. Because even like filming Mikey when he, was throwing my board or yelling at me or treating me poorly, like I still felt the purpose in what I was doing. I saw past that, right? But I guess, traumatizing situations do that to you.
Yeah. What do you think it was about Mike that he was that way to you? Like, I mean, we've talked about this in private, but that was like the cool to be an asshole era.
Yeah.
But I also feel like, I mean, just being entirely honest.
Yeah.
As a kid in New Jersey, I got that cool to be an asshole vibe from Mike, watching Mike.
Yeah.
Like
in
videos, it was a thing. Like people were emulating Mike and kind of like focusing their boards or vibing people out. Like that was like part of his persona.
There's an aspect of that is completely unconscious with his social anxiety. So I think as he's gotten older, it's like much easier to discern the fact that he's not comfortable in big groups of people and is not, and sort of this part of him erupts that protects this other part that doesn't know what the fuck to do. And I think like talk about feral, this is a kid who barely went to high school, who had no real stability growing up and was just universally praised for his skating and had like a kind of aggressive relationship with his brother. So I think like that aggression and that thing sort of bleeds into this other behavior, this playground, if you will. And then along comes this kid right? Who has these qualities that we were talking about before, right? Like my ambition, my persistence. I'm like gonna fucking be there. But I'm also like insecure in my own way. So I'm doing annoying things. Like I was shoving the camera in their face and I was saying stupid things, or maybe I was inviting myself to a situation that I wasn't necessarily invited to. So I wasn't as cool, but I was still in the cool club. And they kind of couldn't live without me because Mike blessed me and was like, Jake's going to film you. So I think a lot of that erupted because Mike had this other thing going on, which could have been his own complicated feelings about what to do with Plan B and how he didn't like a situation. And he's not going to lash out at Mike T and say the thing that's on the top of his mind. So he's just going to fucking berate me. And you know, we know this about relationships, that people destroy things that they love intentionally to create the you know, we all have a temperature that we like to run at, and we like the room to be. And when it gets hot, we really feel alive. And so sometimes people create a climate or an environment that has a temperature that serves this very self-fulfilling energy. So I imagine at a certain point with me, it was much more enjoyable for him at a core level to be like, fuck you, fat Jake, fucking fat ass. Like that felt good to him better than being like, oh, cool, what'd you do last night? Like, all right, oh, let me try again. You know what? I'm just kind of over it. Like, it just felt way better for him to channel that into aggression, because I think that when you look at what he was missing in those real critical childhood years, that aggression becomes this companion that's more fulfilling than the emotional honesty. So I think a lot of it was, and by the way, this is, you know, midlife Jacob, who's done a lot of therapy and is, you know, a psychologist's
Yeah,
wife,
of
and
course.
he talks about all this stuff, looking at with compassion. But then it was totally out of line that he treated me that way. It's fucking crazy, like crazy. And that's why I was really ready to walk away from it after we finished the video, because I was like, this is just, and even Mike T was like, you don't deserve this. It almost felt like we knew they were going to leave because it was so like, the fuck is wrong with these guys? Not these
Yeah, what the
guys.
fuck?
That was
Why?
amazing.
Why was there just balloons?
I don't know. That was amazing.
What the fuck?
But it was, you know, it was, Rick wasn't that way necessarily. He could pick on you and he could rip you apart better than Mikey, because it was much more like subversive.
Yeah, he's more subtle.
Yeah, yeah. But you know, I mean, it was. I think that what do you know, when it goes back, what do I want to talk about in skateboarding? Like I want to talk about some of these things because I think they just kind of let us know why some of these dynamics exist. I meet some younger filmers and they talk about their rhythms and it's like it's the fucking same. You
Mm.
know, you're like, why should it be so hard to get a guy out of bed to do the thing that he wants to do, especially when you're the one that's not being paid, or you're babysitting all of this stuff to a point, you know? And it's like that's why you get a guy like Dylan and a guy like Greg, and it's like they both want to work towards this goal. You know, all those guys when they make parts, or women when they make those parts that they're driven towards, that drive is, you feel it. You know, those guys kind of feels like they want to skate for Bill.
Yeah.
Feels like they're kind of having fun. So the
Yeah, and they
videos,
know there's going to be, maybe they don't. I think about it all the time. Like they probably know when they're getting zoomed in on and like their face is just like, you know what I mean? Or
maybe, yeah. I mean,
they
for
have to
sure,
be okay with that because
ish.
there's
But I just don't think you can land tricks if you know, are in that part of your brain.
really, yeah.
Yeah,
But I mean, there's a tremendous amount of trust in Bill. I think about that all
yeah,
the time. That
yeah,
you're like, is he gonna have the camera on my feet at the right time?
yeah,
Is he gonna film my face up super close
yeah,
for 30 seconds?
yeah.
Is my face gonna be
Yeah,
opening the
but
video?
that's like, you know, an actor, you know, like, you know, playing a scene for a director who's not shooting what they would call coverage. but like shooting a single camera of a scene and the actors just
Yeah.
totally in the scene, knowing the director's putting the camera where it's supposed to be. So they just give their best. So I think those guys just give their best. And maybe when they're rolling away, they flick their hair. Like once they become aware of it, they're like la da da. And then
Yeah.
Bill's like, whatching.
Because you have to know that that's
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah.
happen, you know?
Yeah.
Like I always wonder if any of them are like, dude, don't do 10 seconds of my face like before my part.
Not now. Not now, dude. Not now. Back then, back in my day, get the fucking camera out of my face, Jake.
Yeah.
And now that's all the footage that people want to see.
And you said somewhere that you wish you didn't go to Mike T's viewing.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Why did you feel that way? Was it an open casket or
It
something?
was an open casket, and you know, from my childhood trauma, I had more than I have now, but it's very severe anxiety about death and dying, like crippling.
Okay.
So, like from, my abuse spans 5 to 7. And so basically from that time until my early to mid 20s, I would have a full blown panic attack, like physical panic attack, like, get to the point, I have to get out of my bed. Sometimes I'd have to rip my clothes off, and then I'd yell at the top of my lungs, and then that would calm me down, and then I'd go back to bed. I probably had that 5 nights a week for my from that point on. That and if I didn't have to rip my clothes off and like it would be inside internally, like if I was staying at someone else's house, it would just become this overwhelming thing and then suffocate it down. Okay,
You're
so
saying
that's
like from age 5?
Yeah, 5 to 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
It was
let's
like
go back. We'll finish the viewing story.
Yeah, so imagine my context of how severely terrified I am of the permanence of death.
Yeah.
I'm just like terrified beyond belief, to the point like that number of panic attacks is it's not healthy. Like, and I know this now at my age. I was just like, oh, that's just what I have to deal with. Seeing your best friend, seeing your best friend, seeing your mentor, seeing your advocate, who is actually the only person that like identified the trauma in you and pulled you out of a toxic space and gave you purpose. So the guy that like literally put you over here, I'm going to lift you up, I'm going to push you on your way. You see him completely void of life. And not just void of life, but like empty of life. Looks fake, doesn't look like a real person. So you go from seeing someone, I'd seen him maybe like 2-3 months prior, briefly. And then I go to an open casket and I'm like, I feel like it's my duty to walk up and say something to him. And I was like, I couldn't even like reach my hand in there. And I was like, and then I walk outside and Danny Way is bawling.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, what the fuck? Like Danny Way's crying? Like none of this stuff makes sense. And he literally is like crying, hugging me. Like Danny's hugging me. Like, and he's like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And then I go to like some wake and Colin's dad is there, who's kind of helping like financially like come in now to just offer some advice. He's like, you got to finish the video, Jake. You got to finish the video. And I'm like, I'm like, at the wake. Yeah. Yeah. Because everyone knew that was what would save the company now that Mike was dead. But it's like,
yeah. Like, did you feel like you might not be able to move forward without that person, someone in that role in your life? Were you old enough and the training wheels were off enough for you to be like, I don't need another Mike in my life. I don't need to replace him. But I'm wondering if you were scared that you weren't going to have someone in that role anymore. Not just we understand that Mike's gone and you're devastated, but you're like, well, I don't have a mentor. I don't have a guy over my shoulder editing?
I think it's great to talk about this for people who've lost people and feel lost in their ways and different like timings. But, Mike, we go back to this cosmic, karmic, long tail story trajectory. Mike just totally set me up, right? So, we make questionable and I'm kind of on the sidelines. Then we make virtual and I'm like in the driver's seat and he's basically like, you're good. And then, the final conversations after virtual are like, we're going to do this going forward. You're going to do that. So, and, in the summer after virtual, like there was a guy, I'm not sure if his name was Todd Profit or he was a snowboarder. I got paid. I got like editing equipment as one of my payments for one of the videos I made. So I edited a video. I edited a snowboard video that summer for this guy that Mike told me. He's like, you got to edit this video for this guy. And then I was doing other stuff. So I had this confidence at that point after virtual, I could fucking do anything. I really could. And then I went to junior college to get my enough credit so I could graduate high school because I dropped out. And then I applied to 2 colleges and I got into one. So by the time Mike died, I'm like, oh, I'm going to film school in the fall. The wind that was out of my sails was the fact that Mike and I were going to collaborate and we were going to make skateboard videos together and then start making movies together and telling stories. And, we saw what happened to Spike, and Spike, used some of our footage in a music video, and we had a front row seat for that, like parlaying one thing into another. And Mike understood how to build these things and create momentum. So I didn't feel as if like I didn't have the spark inside of me to keep going. I just felt, that I lost a tether of humanity, of like someone who filtered out the noise and got to the root of it with me. So I didn't feel that massive like inability to move on. I probably would have done more in my 20s and early 30s if Mike was alive. Creatively, I probably would have done more because I think he would have been like, but it was massively traumatic and stifling, for me emotionally to lose someone of that at that gravity and then to experience the loss the way that I did.
I'm wondering the dynamic of the relationship between you and your dad and you and Mike. Like Mike obviously filled a void, or provided something that your dad didn't provide, but your parents also were super cool and supportive and let you wander off into the world. Like when an animal has a baby and they like it made me think of this Banksy quote. Most parents will do anything for their children except let their children be themselves.
Right. I think that I think that, I'm very fortunate that my parents have reverence for passion, and I would say my dad is like an incredibly passionate man, and my mother is a very patient woman. And my mom was a very wonderful maternal mother who, showed me love and was nurturing and caretaking and, cooked meals and was very creative and is an artist and paints and is, and is interested in nature and all these things. And my dad, when I was very young, had this thing called the Center for Living Skills. And it was a workshop curriculum that he did with his partner where they took kids from high school and they would go for a weekend and they would learn how to communicate with each other and their peers and adults around them. So he would do these leadership workshops. And this is when I'm like a really young kid. And so I grew up with a dad who came home after being stimulated by these workshops and seeing these kids and being a mentor to these kids. And then I had all these kids who became grownups who were adjacent to my family's life, who to this day are still interested in me and still, they're only like 10 years older than me or 12 years older than me, but they saw my dad in a wildly different context. So when Mike Ternasky comes in, my dad is like, great, a mentor for Jacob. And my dad had a very like specific kind of black and white way that he saw his relationship with me being raised, which is, it's not my job to be Jacob's friend. It's my job to like be a firm boundary for him when he needs to get whipped into shape or when he needs to know this and that. And I think by the time I'm 16, 15, it's like showing the sparks. By the time I'm 16 and I'm getting paid by a magazine for skateboard photos, he's smart enough to be like, well, we can't suffocate this. We kind of need to support this. And I think that the complexity and the nuance of my relationship with my parents is that the abuse that happened to me, which was at the hands of my neighbor, they kind of were aware that this weird thing was happening. And they didn't know enough about what he was doing to me, but they kind of said, this isn't right. So it's like, hey, this needs to stop. And they even talked to him. And so it wasn't in the big picture. When I snap out of it as I get older, as my mind develops and I become more mature and I go to therapy, I'm like, fuck, they totally dropped the ball with this. Like in an insane way that's so like hard to comprehend how that would happen for me with my kids. But the other side of that is I was unequivocally supported in all my ambitions. And while, they weren't like, hardcore financially backing me in any way at any of these points, like I had to make money. When I lived at home, I had to have a job. I couldn't just live at home. It was like not okay to couch surf at my parents' house. This is summer of '93.
Yeah.
Like I'm 19 or 20.
They knew enough not to stifle you and
Yeah.
be like, oh, what are you need to do something more lucrative. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of parents don't understand their kids who take on a creative pursuit and how to support that. I mean, maybe more now, but
but I think like recognizing passion and endorsing it was like a currency that was not unfamiliar in my household. But like I came home from making virtual reality, right? So that's June. I go to Mike Ternasky's wedding. That's June 19th. I turned 20 the next day. A month later, I don't have a job and I'm just at home. And I just finished this like crazy traumatic experience of making that video and all that. And my parents are like, you need to get a job. Like, it's not okay with us that you're going out with your friends. If you're going to, live in here, if you're going to be in your childhood bedroom, like you have to get a job. So I was like, okay. I got a job at like Sega of America doing tech support for like 4 months. And then I got a job at a restaurant. And then I went back to school and, got into college and,
So let's talk about the abuse situation, because you've referenced it a couple times. But how did that start? So you have a neighbor. Is this like a next door neighbor?
Yeah, I had a next door neighbor who was like
a boy, a man,
a young man, more than 10 years older than me at that point. I think he was like in junior or senior in high school. And, I live like right on the edge of like what's a rural part of Palo Alto. It's, again, very rare that my parents got that property when they did, but there was a little creek and then a hill up to their house. And, on Halloween, they had a little basement area and his room was near the basement. And we would go up there for Halloween and they would have like the grapes as the eyeballs and the bowl. And it was just totally, they went for it. We even vacationed in Oregon and they had a little shack or small cabin on the Metolius River. And we used to go there to their house. And so there was an aspect of it where they were like, these young, this family, very Reagan-esque, parents, patriarch and matriarch.
But then they had friends.
Yeah, they were family. They're our neighbors. And they were like, 10 to 15 years older than my sister and I. They had horses. So we'd ride their horses. So there was this very like, forward, safe perception. And at a certain point, I would, I'm a 5-year-old kid. And I was like a really ambitious, young, fun. Like, you know, I had already memorized all the Star Wars actors, and I was like reciting things that like I had no business reciting. So I was dialed in. So, you know, if you're like an older person who's targeting someone who makes you feel a certain way, I was, you know, that target for this guy. And I, in essence, would feel kind of special to hop over the fence, cross the creek, hop over his fence, walk up, you know, into his house. And, you know, there was a sort of a not ritual in a pagan way or anything, but there was a repeated, you know, sort of coercion thing that he would do with me. And then it, you know, turned into, you know, this consistent molestation, which I didn't really even have a name for or understand until I was quite older. And, you know, it happened on and off for about 2 years. And I think my parents kind of noticed that I would come back from his house in a weird mood or, you know, something. And then, you know, they kind of addressed it like, this needs to stop. We don't know what's happening. I mean, it was, you know, the late 70s. So there was a little bit of like, yeah, it's fine. This happened to all of us, you know? And, but I completely repressed it, completely. Like, you know,
was he able to like coerce you into doing stuff, or was it like forcible?
no, it
What
was
was the experience
totally
like?
coerced me into doing this, you know, oh, lie down. I'm gonna, you know, and, and so it didn't feel like I was doing something wrong. I don't remember him like, you know, using a loud voice with me, right?
Mhm.
It wasn't. And as I got older, after the repressions, you know, passed and I, you know, it all came rushing back, it was like, oh, like someone taught him, someone showed him, you know, how to get away with it.
He was in like high school or something, you said?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
How, and you said it happened like repeatedly. Like, is that like 5
Yeah.
times, 20 times? Like,
I mean, I would imagine more than 20,
wow.
you know, like it just was a normal thing. I just didn't know that it wasn't normal. And
Yeah.
meanwhile, you know, it's like a child that young is not supposed to be sexualized. Um, and then that's when my anxiety started. And, you know, and I think my parents repressed it too. I think my parents were just like, yeah, because I like saw a photo of my parents came down with my mom brought a photo album for my bar mitzvah, and like he's attending my bar
Oh,
mitzvah,
wow.
and I'm like today I'm like, motherfucker, I would have fucking Torah stabbed that motherfucker, like, you know. Um, but I think those big things we really push to the back, you know, and in life you got to put it in front as raw and naked as possible so that it doesn't become that thing anymore, and then you deal with it, because as long as it's a thing, you're not really dealing with it.
I'm curious. I mean, I apologize for going backwards, but I'm
No, that's
curious,
fine.
like how are you feeling when it's happening? How are you feeling when you leave your house every day and you
Well,
go
yeah,
on your little journey and you cross the creek? And
yeah, I think
I
that
mean,
that's
how did you know to keep going there for him?
well,
Like,
you're
it was
you're a
a
kid,
normal,
and
like, oh, we play after school, or you know, like,
I think that's the reality of abuse, you know, is that the person has a position of power over you. So for me, as this young kid, like, of course, you want the cool kid on the block to like you, and so you go up to their house blindly at that point, right? Because as a child, you're just, you know, stimulation response.
yeah, yeah.
So you're just like, that's why iPads and devices are so just destructive to kids at such a young age. They don't know how to turn that off. They're just not wired for it. So, and I'm also not wired for the sophistication of what's going on from a coercion, you know, standpoint. I'm just like, oh, the cool neighbor wants me to come up to his house and we're going to play some games, and, you know, and maybe, you know, when it's happening, you're saying this is weird, or, but you know, You know, you also feel like a little bit like, you know, I remember he would like pull the blinds of his room, and you would know that this was a little bit of a private thing, you know? And so I think that, you know, those are all really signs, right? That something is wrong. But also it makes it feel in this fucked up way like, oh, more special, you know, it makes it feel more private.
So were you ever able to sort of communicate that to your parents, or did you just never?
You know, it's
Like,
interesting.
how did
So
it resolve itself, or not resolve
it's
it?
it's
How
it's
did it
multi
end?
it's multifold, which is, again, we talk about this long arc of the life, and you go, oh, it's crazy that your story ended up that way. Well, I married my wife in my backyard of my parents' house. Now you have to understand that he, up until you know, I think 3 or 4 years ago, they still owned that house, still lived in that house. And so every time that I go home to my house, I turn a corner and drive past that driveway, and I look up and I see that hill, and I see that house, and I see that path, and I see that creek, and I see that fence. My entire adult life, I've had that feeling. And so about 16 years ago, before I marry my wife, I'm in therapy. I'm doing a lot of work because I'm finally in the relationship that I want to be in, and that's going well, and I'm really in a good place. And I say to myself, if I ever see him, my parents, I'm going to confront him, and I'm go for a fucking walk with my wife, and I turn the corner, and he's in the horse corral, and my wife is standing next to me.
Did she know
And oh yeah,
that
yeah,
that's the
totally,
guy?
100%,
Oh wow.
100%. And I yell at him. I say, "Hey," and he looks at me, and I go, "You remember what the fuck you did to me?" And he goes, "Yes." He goes, "Uh-huh." And I'm like, "Well, you know it wasn't fucking right, and I hope to fucking God you never laid your hands on another person." You know, and you know, I said a bunch of stuff to him, and he just stood there and listened, and then he walked away, and I think I just crumbled
Yeah, that's
because it was like
like
this. And what was amazing was my wife was standing next to me. She knows all my trauma and all my pain. And it's like, you know, a lot of times we're in relationships with people and we like don't get it validated. We don't get it like, this is real, what I'm talking about,
oh
what I'm
wow.
dealing with, my way, you know?
There's no denying it, that
And
situation.
she just saw it. She saw him say, yeah. And I'm not in my head. So, you know, I still feel, you know, like I should have fucking gone over there and hit him over the head with the shovel and handcuffed him and, you know,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. But like, you know, I eventually was able to confront him, which was part of my own path to getting there. And then another 10 years later, I'm finally like realized, because of some stuff my parents had mentioned to me, that they just didn't know the gravity of like the abuse, that, you know, what he did to me. So I sat both of my parents down, and I would sort of I recounted that, you know, that ritual to them
Mm-hmm.
of what he did.
So what was the extent of what they knew when you were eventually like,
They
when you were
knew
able to
that like
communicate?
in their brain, they're probably like, oh, Jacob was going up there, and, you know, he's probably there like whatever the safe version of like being molested or being fondled is,
Oh wow.
you know. And like, so, oh, maybe he was just touching there, you know, whatever. And it's like, you know,
Or
I
like
don't,
playing doctor, exploring.
yeah,
Like, yeah.
exactly. So whatever made them feel like it was just that is probably what was in their head. And it became clear to me that you know, that that they didn't really have the full snapshot. And that was even after I confronted him and after all my therapy. So I would say that next breakthrough with my parents was really, you know, that moment where, you know, that happened. And I was able to articulate that to them. And then I would say, like, my relationship with my parents was like very, I want to say, repaired, like in a way that it was tough. But I think, you have these blank areas with people that don't get filled in, and you kind of owe it to yourself, for the people that you care about, to try to fill those spaces in, so that, a relationship could thrive, or it could grow where it couldn't before. So and it was really triggered by the fact that my son was 5 and my daughter was 7. And I looked at them and I was like, this is the age that was happening to me. And I'm like I'd be in jail. I'd be in prison, And then you feel all the complicated things about, like, how do you deal with that with your kids, and how do you have those conversations, and you want to preserve the sanctity of some of those things if so far they've been okay. But at some point they have to, at some point I hope they watch or listen to our discussion, and they become curious about, like, how a life develops in those things. But the key thing with the trauma that's important to point out as it relates to Mike Ternasky is that the fall of 1991, when I am 18 and I am in high school, there's a psychology class that I'm in, and a guest speaker comes in and talks about being a man, being a boy at the time, and being molested by another man. And he talks about it in class. And I am in that class, and I go completely ashen. I feel like I'm going to vomit. And I remember everything, every fucking detail, every smell, all of it. And I'm like, what the fuck? And I wrote a letter to my neighbor. I found that letter recently. The fall of 1991 is when Mike Ternasky says, hey, Jake, I saw the Dogtown video. I saw the Think video. I know you're filming Carroll. You need to come and help us finish this video. We need a third person for me and Sloshbach. So Ternasky pulls me out of that, because that dude's my neighbor right then when I realized that. But I'm this insecure 18-year-old skater. What do I do? Well, Mike T comes and saves my life. And then he fucking dies, and then I got to look at his dead body. So that's the whole, like, and I've only realized recently that the exact timing and the perfection of how he saved me. Because he really did, and by the way, Mike saved a lot of people, a lot. And that's the legacy to me that, like, should go tandem with how he redefined skateboard videos, is how many people he cared about and saved.
I think part of as we age and have experience in the industry and in life, even though a lot of the young kids don't want to hear it or they don't understand it yet, like, that might be our role as older people. Skateboarding tends to, I don't want to say ageist, but the older you get, the sort of more you have to prove why you deserve to still be around, kind of, I feel. You can't skate, right? We can't skate like we used to. People were like, you don't even skate. Why do you get a paycheck from skateboarding? Like, I used to hear that shit all the time. So, I mean, you said something interesting to me at my exhibition when you came down, which, thank you for coming, because
of course.
I was so happy when you showed up. But you said, you referred to us as, like, scholars,
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting, because like, this whole thing that I'm doing right now is me finally being confident as an old skateboarder who does to do something, to try to keep doing things in skateboarding and contribute whatever I can, right?
Yeah.
And it's me not being insecure about my age, or that maybe I did all I can do. Like, as I've improved with therapy over the years and medication, it's like, dude, you can always, they say, like, when was Samuel L. Jackson, like, his career broke in his 50s?
Right. Yeah.
Like,
a late bloomer.
Why am I limiting it? Like, especially with the internet and all the things you can do now, and with my experience and why am I writing myself off, like, as done? I can do it myself instead of having someone else produce my show for
Yeah.
or whatever, you know. So as
I,
old
I
people,
yeah,
you know,
I
I
mean,
just
as
think about our role, you
middle-aged
know,
men. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and those like that, like sensei mentor, you
Yeah.
know, wise man role, I think is important if for the kids who can
Well,
accept it.
there are a lot of people out there who want it and hunger for it. I'll qualify, like, I haven't gotten a check from skateboarding in 30 years. But anyway, I don't feel in any way like I don't ever want to plant a flag in skate culture to say like I know right or wrong about the now. I want to plant a flag for a filmer and for someone who like was deeply a part of a moment in time that I think has resonance, and that I was really fortunate to have a mentor that looked after me. And I also was able to kind of reposition myself to maintain my creative and visual aspirations while still feeling and being a skater in my heart. So I think like there are a lot of people that reach out to me who say, "Hey, I'm a skate filmer. Well, how do I get into commercials? How do I get into films? How do I get into this?" And my DMs are always open for that stuff. And there's a lot of skaters that I've met where I've hired them on my sets as PAs or put them as someone in the camera department. And, recently I connected with Tyler Wilcox, who's a young filmer who's really rad. And we started going seeing movies together. And, but it started like literally with my friend Pete Thompson, because I got out of skating, like after virtual reality, I was like, and then Mike died. I'm like, it's a wrap. I'm done. And then I finished Secondhand Smoke, and I'm like, I'm really done. Of course, a couple years later, I do some 411 parts and blah, blah, blah. But Pete was like, how do you do it? Like, I just don't feel like I can do it. And then I remember when he finally made that transition, we were on the phone a lot. I was just like supporting the talent that he has. And I think that, you know, the pluses and minuses of skateboarding, we know well, right? It's ageist. It's elitist to a degree. It's
Cool.
wild. Yeah, it's wildly inclusive and then wildly exclusive. Um, and it also is an environment in which you learn extraordinary work ethic. And you can, if you're not just in the pro skater mindset, if you're in the periphery of it, you have to deal with really difficult people, unreasonable deadlines, lack of structure. And so you really build this really rich skill set that pretty much there's no situation that you're not prepared to crush. And the problem is you get into the silo and you feel like your life is just this because it is all consuming, because it can be. It's the boards, it's the ads, it's the videos, it's the music, it's the culture, it's the shops. It is a whole world unto itself. And you feel beholden to that world. And so the moment you try to step into something else, you don't feel worthy. And that's just that insecure thing that kind of drove you to skateboarding in the first place. So the trick is realizing that you have a superpower, which is that you do and are a part of the thing that everyone wishes they did and were a part of. And and then you have this ethic and this ability to do that. So I feel that it's my job to have conversations with skaters and support their ambitions and be a voice of someone who found a way through the trauma, which is significant and important because in my experience, the majority of skateboarders that I've met have low levels and high levels of trauma innately in their childhood, which is what drove them towards an individualistic sport that has a sadistic quality and very physically, grading aspect to it where there's self-punishment involved. So, when you immediately see someone getting into something that involves being hurt and being okay with being hurt, there's usually a deeper underlying psychological thing at play that is rooted towards their childhood where they developed a negative self-image, which came from something. So I feel like if I can help people understand some of that and then just be a voice, hey, I get it,
Are you still in therapy?
I
Or are you
do
just
too.
married to a therapist?
I'm married. I mean, my wife and I keep each other accountable, but I have a therapist that I've been seeing in LA for like 25 years. And at this point, I just do tune-ups. So when I was
or
going
if you're
through,
feeling something
yeah, if I'm,
difficult.
I just text her, and we have a really great relationship because I think she feels like I actually instituted all the stuff that we talked about. Because I really started working with her prior to my wife, and she saw me sort of being always being the girl's best friend and always being everyone's therapist and all of that. So then she sees me and gets our, family Christmas cards, and while I still have all the existential rumblings that I think are normal for a creative person, I am really happy with where I am in my life and really proud of that journey, you know.
Yeah, I've been pretty consistent since 2019. I'd say
It's a game changer.
almost
Yeah.
weekly, but and yeah, I mean, I want to say my therapist is like one of my best friends in the sense that,
Yeah.
you know, you dump
They,
everything.
yeah.
They I don't want to say cure, but what's come out of our hour and 15 minutes together every week
Yeah.
has been like phenomenal. Even the fact that she convinced me to try medication, which I
Yeah.
was vehemently against.
Yeah. Of course.
She had the pixie dust to like
Yeah. The,
incrementally help me to the point where I'm like, I trust you. I'll try this medicine.
yeah. The thing about therapy, once you have that relationship, and it's not the secret to therapy, but the more honest you can be, the more honest they can be, and the more growth potential you have. So for me, you know, I can talk about my abuse in this way because I just don't give it any power anymore because it's just
Mhm.
innately a part of me. And I understand the psychological underpinnings and how it's impacted my development of who I am, but it's just a part of me. But if I treat it too sacred and all this stuff, then it's like, oh, I'm giving it this value. Well, the
Mhm.
value is that it's shaped my life in a way that I've had to overcome and I've had to work through. But a lot of people they go to therapy. Well, I'm afraid to talk about, like, you might have these impulses or you might have these things. And it's like, so you go to therapy and this one thing you don't talk about because you're embarrassed or ashamed. It's like, if there's one place to be not embarrassed and not ashamed, it's therapy. And the moment you go blah and you say that thing, again, it goes back to, I think what you're trying to do with this forum and platform, which is like, when you have the right conversations about things, there is a therapeutic process to that, right?
Mhm.
Like, having a good, healthy conversation about something is a means of processing it because you're saying it out loud, you're letting it go, you
But
know?
also what it can do for other,
Well,
I say
yeah,
kids.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
that's like my big hope too.
yeah. And when I was 10 years old and was having these persistent, insane panic attacks on a nightly basis, they did take me to a therapist, and I did like sand play
Oh
with this
wow.
therapist. Her name was June Matthews. I didn't remember that name until right now. And I remember her house, and she had this sandbox, and I would play, and she would observe me. And I went to that therapist. So despite all this stuff, now, by the way, the abuse never came up in those therapy sessions. I don't ever remember, like, because it was deeply repressed. But I was taught early that it's okay. My dad did these leadership workshops. We talked about shit. I would come home from school. He'd say, "How was your day?" And we'd be like, "That was fine." And he'd be like, "No, no, no. How was your day?"
Yeah.
It was not good to some aspects, but then in other aspects, you learn to communicate. And I've had plenty of people in my life who just don't know how to communicate and don't know how to do that. And therapy
When
can teach you.
when was the first time you went as an adult? Like on your own? Or were you always going from like
So fucked up. I had a summer camp counselor because I went to, after around skateboard camp and prior, I went to this amazing summer camp in the Sierras. And that was a transformative experience because, again, imagine this kid who has all this shit inside that's not being addressed and he wants to be liked. And I just had a horrible experience in school. I just felt picked on. I was very small. And I also, like, brought it on myself with being a little bit of a nagging kid and, obnoxious and all that stuff, smart ass, all that. And so at summer camp, I actually went to camp and I just could be me. And then people liked me for me. So that was the first place I felt that. There's like all my stories, they have a relevance and it loops back. One of the summer camp counselors, when I went back to that summer camp, it changed locations up to Santa Rosa. There was a summer camp counselor that I totally connected with, deeply connected with. When I'm in college, after Mike Ternasky dies, I'm in my junior or senior year, it comes out that he fucking got arrested for molesting kids.
Oh, wow.
And this was like a guy that, like, you know, you're summer camp counselor. Like, you're in the showers and you're playing sports, and it's like, it's summer camp. Like, there's, not to say there should be inhibitions, but it's just fun. It's play. It's safe. And then it made me like, nothing, I know that nothing ever happened with him. And I have another friend who was very close with him, and nothing happened with him. But you go back and you start looking, and there were a couple weird things. And it was just like, so, you know, Mike T dies right before I go to college. Then I'm in college, and I have this other like mentor type of figure who was really like an older brother to me. And then he goes to prison for that. And he basically just said he was guilty so that none of the kids had to testify, because he felt really terrible for them. And he just didn't want them to be in that position, and he felt all that shame. But then, so that's when I really went to therapy. And I also was drinking pretty heavily at that time, and I had a couple self-destructive evenings where, like, you know, I found myself at the bottom of a staircase, you know, after taking like a fall, and being like, yeah. And I was very, very heavy at that point. I had a big beard, and I just was really destructive to myself physically, you know.
So all this abuse,
Yeah.
how does it shape Jacob, the skate filmer, director? How does it play into you dealing with Mike Carroll's abuse in those filming situations? Like, you know, you're a punching bag.
Yeah.
But do you not know how to stand up for yourself? Like,
No, I don't. No. Like, that's,
how does the abuse play into the relationship with Mike Carroll, and then and even like the way you put your output into the world of skateboarding and beyond?
Yeah. I mean, here's the trick with life. I believe here's the trick. That's I don't mean to say it like that, but here's what I've learned.
Mm-hmm.
If you take the worst thing that's happened to you, it's probably one of the key ingredients to who you are. And if you have overcome that thing, meaning you've outlived the event and are still alive, you've probably found a way to harness it for momentum. So would I change those things that happened to me? I can't change them. It's a futile argument to say, I wish that I was never abused. Because if I wasn't abused, would I have had the same drive that I have? Would I have the same emotional intelligence that I have? Those are two ingredients that I'm very proud of me for being me. So, you know, I think that very specifically in what you're asking, the abuse made me tolerate so much and take so much shit, because in a way, mentally, I deserved it. So I think that when Mikey's yelling at me, I'm for sure I'm taking it, for sure. The other thing is, there's this thing about wanting to please other people that is innately tied to someone who's been on the receiving end of the abuse, that I don't want to disrupt this situation, because as fucked up as it is, you're still the kid that's going back up to that place. And that's the guilt that you never get over, because you're like, what's wrong with me? Why was I going back up there if this guy was doing some horrible, horrific act to me, you know, or whatever? So there's a wiring that happens with physical and emotional abuse, in which you become a pleaser of other people, and you set the other person's happiness or, you know, satisfaction in any given moment above yours. So for me, I was always at a higher calling of whatever I was doing in skateboarding. One, I wanted to be liked deeply. And two, I was relentlessly willing to do whatever it took. So if I had to be in an uncomfortable situation, I would simply be in that uncomfortable situation. If
Well,
Mike Carroll, go ahead.
imagine you walked away from filming Mike because you didn't,
Yeah,
you know
imagine
what I
when he
mean? Because
threw my board in the ocean. I told him to fuck off, and I fucking throttled him.
yeah, and you guys like never finished the parts, or
Yeah,
someone else had to
but
come
I
in.
was able to compartmentalize. Maybe in a part of my brain, I deserved it. Maybe I am annoying.
Or you were
Maybe
just tolerating abuse because you've done that in the past.
for 100% that. But also, when you have that negative self-image, the way that people feed that, you validate it. So maybe I am that guy. And then the challenge in life is you're in these social dynamics and these roles, and you're actually taking on those roles because it feeds this other negative part of yourself that you've never come to understand. That's a lot about, I think, about weight. And I mean like weight, heaviness, like that, like, oh, I am fat. I am overweight. I am heavy. I am lazy. I am this. I am that. So it's easy. And then you look at people who become a little bit heavy, then really heavy. And it because you're feeding the thing that you want to be the true negative self-image of yourself. It's very core to addiction, you know? And a lot of people, who say it, who feel like a fraud and have that negative, just, I am a piece of shit. The person in the abusive relationship that can't get out. So in an interesting way, like my abuse was fundamental to my development emotionally. It was fundamental to my connection to skateboarding because I was an outcast and I didn't know why. I couldn't connect with people and I didn't know why. And then it was essential to my relationship with Mike Ternasky because he has that ESP and he can target the kids that have the trauma. Not speaking for anyone else on that team, but knowing what is generally in the population and information out there, all those guys on Plan B have very significant stuff in their life that they've talked about. Rodney had a gnarly childhood. Pat Duffy's dad died before Plan B. Danny Way had a gnarly childhood. Mike Carroll had a gnarly childhood. Rick, like, it all fits. There's a couple outliers there that have seemingly pretty good lives, like a Sal Barbier, good family. Matt Hensley, good family. Sheffy, good family. But there's a lot of, he saw that in people. So, but if I don't have that trauma, does he see it in me? Do I end up there? Does he give me as much of a role on like virtual at that point if I don't have that spark in that thing? Because maybe part of him giving me that role is the same reason why I give young kids opportunity, because they just deserve it and I want to see them do it. I owned a company for 10 years and I ran all of post-production and I hired all these kids out of film school. They were in film school. I just hired them as interns, paid interns. Mm-hmm. And then we'd be working on a huge project and I'd put them on that project. I don't fucking care. But they did it. And if they didn't do it, they would learn. And all those kids are super successful now, but they were like, holy shit, my name's in the movie. It's like, yeah, you did the work because you rose to the occasion. There was something in you that, and the ones that didn't get that treatment, they didn't last that long. It told the story that it was supposed to tell. So I think that the reshifting is that these things, these horrible things that we think that happen to us that shape us in a negative way, they might actually be the key that unlocks us. And you're a great example of that. When you unpacked your autism and were able to own it, it actually empowered you to kind of believe in yourself more than you ever have, because you were like, oh, I thought I was just this way. Now there's a reason.
I thought I was weird in a way that was confusing to me. Like
right.
Now I know I'm weird, but I know why.
Yeah.
And I don't have to figure out every situation, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I know why I did that, or I know why that person reacted weird to me.
Yeah.
It's not an excuse for shitty behavior, but it's like,
no,
everything's translated now.
Yeah.
And I said something, I tried to make a joke and it didn't work.
Yeah.
And I know why.
But the important thing there, and you have fun with this.
Oh yeah, totally.
But the important thing is you say it out loud so that people know. So if we're in some of our DMs and you won't let something go, I know that that's your perseverance. that is innately tied to that quality that you have.
I don't
So,
even know I'm doing something that might be like
but
not
that
wrong, but I think I'm being totally normal.
right,
I'm like, dude, this
right,
kid
right.
won't shut up.
That's yeah, but it's not, and it's so I think that part of it is this goes back to verbalizing these things that may appear to be difficult, and it's the best thing to do, because just let it go and see what happens. And there is an aspect of like, you don't want to, you know, I've shared more about the abuse and the specificity because you asked more questions than anyone has asked before.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel there's a bigger conversation that we're having, so it makes sense to do that. You don't just want to pile that into something for the sake of piling it in, because if someone is searching, which I think a lot of people who will find your dialogues and conversations are going to be searching for things because they're going to be attracted to some of those aspects that you're being candid about. If they've had a horrific experience and can't find the words to it, maybe they tell their loved one for the first time. And I've had conversations with people who shared for the first time that they had been sexually molested. And I just listened and honored that. It is an extraordinary thing to say out loud because it is packed inside of this fucking Edgar Allan Poe coffin cased bricked spackled layered thing. And like, if you can chisel that thing open and start to pull it out, you just give it less power over you.
What do you think the industry needs more of, or where could it improve?
It's a hard question for me to answer because I don't feel an authority to have an opinion on the skate industry as a whole today. As a consumer of skateboarding who's invested in the love of it, I certainly feel and connect deeply to the female skateboarders in skating. I certainly, when the Olympics rolled around, that was what I was most interested in watching. There's a part of me that like, I want to just see women filmers and stories of them and, more of that and unpacking and that unique point of view. And I would hope it's not a kitsch thing that's advertised as kitsch or token. I would hope it would be more innate in the culture, not as
Vans video
hard to find.
The new Vans video, the keepsake video.
I haven't watched it.
Is that done by a woman? I feel like maybe I'm tripping, but the name is like Shari something.
Yeah, I feel like they're
like a female name.
Yeah. But that goes to show that like certain things I don't see because I'm not as in the culture as someone who's making a living in skateboarding.
Oh,
so
I'm just letting you know that like I saw that and I was like, holy shit, is this one of the first like not a woman's video done by a woman, but a skate video done by a woman.
Yeah.
Just like, I don't know if has there been a female magazine cover, or was it?
I feel like there was.
It might have been recently, but
yeah, that feels vaguely familiar, but I don't. What has Thrasher done that yet? We'll get corrected immediately, but I think that like it shouldn't be this hard for us to say, is it, was it?
Yeah, totally.
And like, I just, and there have been recent women's parts that are rad, that are fun. But I just think part of that is like, if we talk about what is skateboarding, the way we understand the DNA of skateboarding, being a woman in skating is skateboarding. That's more skateboarding than anything else today.
Yeah.
Because you're pushing through barriers and obstacles. You're not accepted. You're not the norm. All those things. Like, another aspect that I feel strongly about is just like more dialogue and more preservation about the history of, skateboard videos and documentation. I recently was going back and forth with Tony Roberts, who has a YouTube channel called Real Skate Stories. and he's just putting out all his raw footage, and he has these amazing anecdotes about filming things, and rightfully so. Tony claims and has been a pioneer and did firsts in filming and skating. But I obviously get very sensitive when I hear someone say, this is the first time this was done, because...
Was he the guy that said he did the face to feet first?
Yeah.
And it seemed like a vague Strobeck reference.
It was not vague.
Oh, yeah.
As a Strobeck reference. And, and around a similar time, like I know Schlossbach was doing long lens stuff in the late 80s, and I have some footage of his from 87 and 88. So it's just like, to me, like making that claim, I'm sensitive to that. I'm not telling you that he's right or wrong because I don't know the dates, but I'm sensitive to that claim. But it gets at this bigger conversation about the scholarly aspect of having a proper archive for all of skate videos, having a curriculum in which we discuss and teach and talk about the language of skateboard videos and when movements happen, and techniques and formats and releases. And, I know, Animal Chin was screened in a movie theater and it had a resounding thing. And I know that Mike Ternasky and Tony Magnuson fucking drove back to San Diego. We're like, we want to make something that felt like that. And they made Shackle Me Not. And I know that, Shackle Me Not had a premiere, and I know that Hocus Pocus had a premiere. But I know that there was not ever a premiere like Questionable until the Questionable premiere. No one had ever walked into a screening and then walked out knowing that skateboarding had changed intrinsically from a technical execution standpoint. That had never happened before. And so it's important to kind of shape these narratives and help us understand how we got here from a language standpoint, because we rely so much on the visual language in skateboarding. So, it would be rad in my dream, that there's like female scholars who made skate videos with men and women in it who are talking about the history of skateboard videos, so that some young girl who's 15 years old feels like, yeah, I can fucking go film men and women and do whatever, but you kind of got to create a backstop for having those conversations, and then you got to have a place to have them.
I want to see genderless competition, like when the women can go head to head with the men and there's no difference between their ability.
I mean, it feels like it's coming with Raisa, right?
And the down Hollywood.
Fucking dude, she's like locked in her fucking Carroll hand.
That was
insane.
First try.
Yeah.
Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that was first try.
Yeah.
But I went to a contest last summer. It was the Vans US Open on the beach, or I don't know the name of the contest. But it was mixed. It was women. It was Felipe Nunez. It was, and it was so fucking cool, dude.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that in some like woke, like, like it was just like watching the dynamic of having all of that personality and stuff out there. It's what everyone brings into it, not just because they're a woman. Like watching Shiloh Katori like feeding off her friend David Reyes on a rail, and she worked her way up to different tricks. And
I mean, wouldn't you just want to watch contest. Like just watching a session, with Raisa and another like male rail dog, and like just watching them skate Hollywood High together, like that would be like a beautiful thing, to see that happen. You see it a bit at the vert contests and stuff like that, but these young girls who are skating vert, I know there's that one girl that Colin mentors, and Sky Brown. It's like it's happening on vert.
Is that Reese?
Is it Reese? She's very young. She's like is she 12 or 13?
I don't know. Listen to us, old.
Yeah, exactly.
Old guys. How long have you been working on this project?
On that's like a that's like a loaded question, because I would say that the moment I started digitizing my archive with like Patrick Odell for Epically Later in 2007 and the Lakai shoot that I did with Mikey at the same time, and then Waiting for Lightning in 2010, I was kind of like, oh, I have some shit. And then I always felt like I gotta fucking, I gotta do something. I gotta make something. And I was like, oh, I gotta make a skate book. But then the skate book was like, it's gonna be really emotional. And I was like, well, I was talking with Greg Hunt, and this is now about 6 years ago. Like literally before he made his Dylan book, he pitched me the Dylan book, and he's like, I gotta do that. And then he made like, I think 2 other, he's made 3 books since we first talked about it. But I was like, it felt right that my first book is kind of this journey of skateboarding. So I think it's from an intense focus standpoint, it's been like a year plus, a year or 2. Yeah. Yeah.
And for people who don't know, can you give us a brief synopsis of what this book is?
Yeah. The book,
and I also want to know where the title came from.
Where do you want to start? You want to start with the title?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, the title, grab a copy.
Is that my copy?
Show it. Yeah, sure. That's the copy. And you got me on the back filming Dell. The title, I did a lot of exploratory writing when I was trying to think of, how I would start the book. And I just kept thinking about the time, and it was like, it all happened. And, I have this other phrase that I use for my archive account, that was now, : it was everything, which will probably be the book title for my skate only book. But, I just was thinking about this moment of being a kid, and that I was so fortunate to witness something. And then I think I wrote it all happened right before my eyes. And then I just saw the end of that phrase, and I think I sent it, I think I started to do like a shitty Photoshop mock-up. And there's actually an interesting totem. I'll show you this. And how that title came. But, this frame right here, you see the perforations. This is 16 millimeter film, and this is the music video that I filmed in Hawaii for Hieroglyphics in 1998. And the guy in the background is my close friend Domino, who's Dell's manager. That's Dell rapping. We're in this place in Honolulu that doesn't even exist anymore. And the concept for the music video was, it was going to be like a tourist video that kind of paid homage to this Souls of Mischief video called 93 Till Infinity, which was like this nature video. And Domino sent me a photo one day, and he sent me this. And that is literally the photo he was taking here. So and I'm wearing my virtual reality t-shirt, which I always wore when I was working or getting paid to film. And there was something about looking through the camera lens and seeing this whole thing happen. And then the book itself focuses on 1988 to 1998. And it really shows this sort of innocent passion, eagerness of this kid with a camera, and then meeting skateboarders, documenting skateboarders, going to San Diego, filming, making Plan B videos, connecting with hieroglyphics, working with hieroglyphics, working for Blunt Magazine, doing journalism and photography, and going to film school, and then continuing to document hieroglyphics. So there's just this angle that the book takes, which is like unpacking my creative journey from first being sparked in skateboarding to being a director of a music video for a band I loved. And then it kind of just shows this life of of ephemera and artifacts and mediums, you know, from video frame grabs to medium format film to motion picture film and Polaroids and all of it. And I was just so immersed in it. And as we, you know, have talked about, I tried so hard to be liked and tried so hard to connect as a kid. And I just, you know, my camera was my tool. So the book just shows a life behind the camera and a life like really trying to connect with the culture. I would say the book is about, you know, a third of that core skateboarding, and then it's about 2/3 of Heiro and this real moment where they like turned to independent music and kind of were writing their own story, which was so incredible. And in the process of working on this, I did a bunch of interviews with them, which I may want to shape into an oral history of some sort. Just because I was so connected to them at this time and I was so involved. And sometimes, you know, when you have those personal relationships, you just can get more out of the people when you're talking to them because they just trust that you're not going to do anything, you know, out of turn with what they're saying.
How'd you meet them? Well, how did it begin? Because it eventually goes into their music being questionable.
Yeah. I mean, that's
which then, and this is something we'll talk about later, but the importance of skateboarding videos to musicians, especially back then.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, their music was in the moment. So in 1991, you know, we start hearing Dell's music, and Javante has this demo tape that has like Souls of Mischief songs, Dell songs, like crazy songs that are kind of post I Wish My Brother George Was Here, which is Dell's first record that has Mr. Dabalina and 1 2 1 2. And that tape had this just fucking rawness. I still have that tape. I'll just because we're doing it, and it's like.
I wonder if it's online somewhere to download, huh?
No. This is. I mean, this. I will have it at the show, but this tape right here, which I photographed in the book, is, and I call it goodies. So it says goodies on the front and goodies on the back. And the reason it says that is so that if someone sees it, they don't know what it is. Because back then you wouldn't want, you know, you wouldn't just give someone a demo tape of hot music. That was like I could get a favor out of that. Like, oh, you know, I'll trade you. But that tape was like hot. And through a series of events, I kind of borrowed it for the night unknowingly from Mike Carroll. And then I copied it and I listened to it incessantly. And Dell was like really, we were all listening to his record. We all, you know, he was wearing Jerbo's, we were wearing Jerbo's. And it just made sense that song was going to be used in Sal's part, which, you know, historically is really important because, you know, black skaters weren't always represented by black artists in skate videos. And, you know, you got Sheffy and Sal culturally being represented the way they wanted to and what they were listening to, which I love that about that moment. That's important. And then there was this track called Burnt, which was like the first Heiro group track that was on the, I think it was the Mr. Dabalina 12-inch. So on the Mr. Dabalina 12-inch, on the B side was Burnt. And they actually spelled the name hieroglyphics wrong on that track too, which is kind of amazing. When people say, why did they spell the name wrong in the credits of the Plan B video? And it's like, well, because I had the record, that's how I got it to edit to it. And that's how they credited it. But basically through Javante, we just like, hey, can you ask Dell if this is cool? You know, that we use the music, and he's like, sure. So we used the music. And back then, you know, I was always responsible for the credits on the Plan B videos. So I would just type up exactly how the credits were on an album and put it in the video. And I was like, well, I was 18. So I was like, well, we can use it. We just credit it properly. So that's how we ended up using Dell and that Heiro track for Mikey and for the credits in Questionable. And those guys kind of went on tour and were out in the world, and people were like, hey, we heard your music. And they were a little bit taken aback by it. Like, really? How? And they just had no idea that this fan base was growing. So when it came time to make virtual reality, I think in that process, I somehow learned that Dell had a manager. His name was Domino. Maybe we gave him a special thanks, or he like helped close the deal with the music for Questionable. But I went to him directly and was like, hey, can I have unreleased music for the next video that we're making, the next Plan B video? And he put me in touch with a guy at Jive as well, David Goldfarb, who kind of cleared it that we could do it. And he sent me tapes of stuff, unreleased Heiro stuff. So before everything was like gate kept. Like Mikey and Javante are like, nah, you can't have this, blood. Like you know, little scrub, like Fat Jake, you can't have this. So I'm like, fuck that. I'm going right to Domino. And then, you know, I still have all those tapes. And I now had that music. And then, you know, I was picking songs. And at that point, like all the music's unreleased. So, you know, I'm suggesting stuff or making those choices. And then, you know, we used that Souls of Mischief song for Tony Ferguson's part. And then this is kind of where it all seals together. Souls of Mischief go on tour in the summer of '93 after virtual reality came out, and they're doing signings in like the Midwest. And if someone comes up to them and they're like, hey, how can we buy that Souls of Mischief track? Now, mind you, that's an unreleased track that no one would have heard because it didn't make the album. And they're like, what are you talking about? And it kept coming up and up and up. And they would do shows, and they realized how many people were coming to them from this skate world and how resonant their sound and their energy was for that audience. And that was kind of...
Did the Casual song come from?
Casual songs too? Came from that as well. I mean, A Little Something, you know, for Sheffy's part, you know, and Lose in the End for Mikey's part. You know, those were all for Casual's record that didn't come out for like another year. And Casual has stories about doing shows, and like half the audience was skaters and snowboarders. And at that moment in time, it was a little bit of like, you lose a little street credibility if there's too many white people in your audience, you know? But he was always like, if fans fuck with me, I fuck with them. Like, I'm not going to, you know, be judgmental that way. But really that moment, and, you know, I haven't tried to claim it in that way, because to me, it just spoke so much to my personality in the moment. And so much of that taste in music is the people that you're around. I was just really active in getting it, you know?
Yeah.
And you know, I say like I was a made man with the Heiro guys after that, because they're like, oh shit, this kid's legit. Like, you know, I'm a 19, 20-year-old kid that's like, you know, rainmaking some stuff for them with listeners and people who attend their shows. And arguably the hip hop community is one of the most loyal, the skateboard community is one of the most loyal communities for Heiro to this day. You know, it really, and to me, like, that's kind of the book, you know, it's like really cementing my legacy and attachment to Plan B and hieroglyphics and just showing like how resonant these moments and times can be.
You know, as you're talking, I thought about something else, which is interesting.
Yeah.
The same exact thing was happening for Green Day at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, we used 1039, right. In Questionable.
Boy.
Yeah. Disappearing Boy. I mean, you know, not to claim it.
Skaters were starting to show up at their shows.
I mean, No Effects, you know, we used them for the first, like no one had used them before, you know. I mean, there's a lot, you know. Mike Ternasky had incredible taste in music, and I'd like to think I have good taste in music, and particularly with skate parts and what works, to make it, you know, to find a song that has the right bones to get a part that you can get behind. But,
yeah, I remember going to a Green Day show back then. And a couple things. Well, the first thing was I was expecting like punk rock kids, like
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
ska kids, you know,
Yeah.
and it's literally all baggy blue jeans, skate shoes, you
Yeah.
know, airwalks, and
Yeah.
it was like all skaters and skater girlfriends, right?
Yeah.
And I remember Billy Joe even said, like, how many of you guys are here because of the Plan B video, or how many of you
Wow.
guys heard us in the Plan B video?
Wow,
Yeah.
that's rad.
And it was like, rah,
I've
you
never
know?
connected or met any of those guys. And I mean, look, I think we had a small part. And if memory serves me correct, Rick Howard was the one who was listening to that Green Day record. So he put us on that. Because I remember that CD looked so kind of janky and bootleg.
Yeah, the cover's like hand drawn.
Yeah. And but I think it's like it really speaks to like the king making capacity of skateboard culture, in that, you know, we have a great ear, we have great taste and style, and even the trends that go the wrong way, like we're amplifying trends that consistently penetrate the culture.
I remember just as a skateboarder, especially in New Jersey, I'd never been acknowledged like that before.
Yeah.
The way Billy Joe did that.
That's right.
And that was like so cool.
Yeah.
And
And
then
I mean,
I'll
that
tell
was
you another.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say
No,
that was such a unique moment to be acknowledged. So that must have felt like 92, 93, like, fuck, man, you're talking to me? You know, you're saying
there was
fuck
only
you to everybody, and that guy's talking to you. Then, like, you're a fan for life.
I mean, it was like 500 people in there.
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
right.
And it was probably like a venue that was a nightclub on most nights, and then like did shows during the week or something.
Yeah.
It's so small.
Yeah.
But fast forward to like peak New York City, like maybe 96, 97. I was skating at Time Life, which is across from Radio City.
Yeah.
And I was with a bunch of dudes. And all of a sudden I hear this voice behind me just talking, walking. And I'm like, I turn around, it's Guru.
Yeah.
With like a beautiful girl on each arm. Right.
Fascinating.
And I was like, I mean, he's got one of the most distinct voices ever. Right. You know?
Yeah.
So I turned around and I was like, hey, like, you know?
Yeah.
And
that's like prime Jazzmatazz too.
Yeah, it was, right. It was totally like right around that era. And the skaters who were all with me were a little bit ahead of me. And I stopped and turned around and I was like, yo, big fan, blah, blah, blah. And then the other kids scooted back to where we were.
Yeah.
And he was just like, man, I gotta thank you, skateboarders. Like, you've done so much for me. And, you know, just acknowledging again, like literally saying, like, I owe part of my career to you. I owe my success to you. And it was like, I don't know. Everybody like asked him a question or two, but I just remember being like so happy that he said thank you.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting it, but like, again, like being acknowledged as a skateboarder. I was reviewing our first conversation, and something that stuck out to me was you were saying how Mike, you know, always found people who needed help.
I think his brother and his widow, Mary, would have a little more insight into like maybe the design of his thinking, you know, but as a recipient of that focus and seeing, you know, like Danny would be wild and crazy and Mike would sort of tolerate Danny's wild and crazy, but he would course correct as gently as he could. And he was definitely like harder on me than he was on Danny, because there's a little bit more stakes with that relationship with Danny because he's a pro for the team. I think that Mike had a savant level intuition about human beings. I think he just totally intuitively could code switch between dealing with Mike Carroll and dealing with Rodney Mullen. Two, you know, socially anxious people who are savants on skateboards who have trauma. And the fact that he was dealing with both of those speaks to his intuition about finding people with trauma. So I don't think he targeted it. I think that, look, the people who tend to have high horsepower, and I don't want to make a generalization because I don't know the statistics or the research, but like when you look at great stories in sport and like physical excellence and performance, there's usually like a crazy driver. You know, the gnarliest boxers historically were like people who came from tough childhoods, and you know, and you look at UFC and MMA and like all these people like are like, God, you know, coming from tough countries are making it in a certain way. And I think skateboarding attracts those people. And I think Mike had an intuition. And the lesson in that is just like, really the lesson is to be empathetic as a human being. Like, how do you, like, it's funny, right? Like in this conversation here, I think I'm sort of thinking this and saying it for the first time, but like, how do you build a great skate team? Well, you're fucking intuitive is what you are. And you better hope that you're an empath, because you better hope that you understand how to feed the humanity of these people, but also drive them at the same time, you know? And I think Stacy Peralta did a similar thing. You know, I don't think Steve Rocco has that DNA or that pedigree. He just kind of let everyone do whatever the fuck they wanted to do. And you can kind of see what happens with that, you know? Whereas I think you look at, you know, the Bones Brigade and you look at the Plan B team, and then you look at how all those people from the Bones Brigade went on to do all these other things. You look at all these people from Plan B and they went on to do these other things. It's like there's no accident. And the common denominator is like some, I don't want to call it a mastermind, but it's like some coach, you know, who understands how to shape and harness that. And I think Mike knew he couldn't solve these kids' problems, but he could give them a purpose. And a lot of that, he read a lot of Carlos Castaneda, which is, you know, the teachings of Don Juan, which is really all like mentorship 101. And like, in a way, like Mike's like a way better mentor than me, because he's like knew how to detach. He knew how to be like really fucking hard, not afraid if the person fucking never comes back, you know? And for me, I'm like constantly like, oh, I don't want to hurt this person's feeling, but the right thing to do right now is to fucking hurt their feelings. Like you know that sometimes, but that humanity and empathy keeps you from doing it.
You know how a lot of what drives what we do now is our trauma, you know, or how we got through it, or
the resilience for sure.
I don't expect you to speak out of turn, but did Mike have any kind of childhood trauma like the way we did that made him?
Yeah, I mean, I
so
don't,
in tune to.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything like that's sacred, or I would certainly, you know, never betray any trust if there was some like secretive thing. But, you know, I mean, Mike came from a somewhat broken home. You know, his mom, you know, separated from his father, and he was kind of living on his own with his mom and his brother, with their cousins, like I think out in Turlock, and then he had a father figure that came into his life, and that dad, you know, I think they had a, you know, a friction relationship, and Mike was emerging as who he was, and you know, he had a really tight relationship with his brother. You know, his brother Joe and him, they kind of were just like thick as thieves, and just really relied on each other. And I think like they felt this level of strength. And I think it's also like a little bit of that is the era, you know, like, you know, growing up in the 70s with no dad, you know, you're probably riding your bike to baseball practice. Your mom's probably working. You're probably coming home from baseball practice. You're making yourself food. You're probably like on the weekends, you know, maybe your mom is like, oh, going on a date or something, and that's like shitty for you. So you and your brother like sneak out or just go to the drive-in. So I think there's a lot of like self-reliance that emerges, you know, with in that era, right? In the 70s and 80s, like I feel like latchkey kids and in that sense was like, you just understood what it took to work hard. You understood what it was like to be in uncomfortable situations and get through it. God knows, skateboarding in my teenage years in San Francisco in the South Bay, like there were a number of instances where I thought we were going to get shot or something was going to happen. And you kind of just had to play it cool and go with the flow, and you learn in those moments. So I just think Mike had that desire to try to connect, because I think he was missing that connection as a kid. And not to be corny, but he's in a way very much like an angel, who was sort of like sent down cosmically to like help all these people. I can't not see that. I have I call it crazy, but it's not crazy. It's like beautiful. But when I was a kid, like I had like a guardian angel. Like my mom had someone, they like took my face and like drew it with like a sun glow behind it. It was like super 70s, like, paint, pencil colored thing, like really trippy. And it looked like me, but not really. And it had like a halo behind it. And much later, when I moved out of my childhood bedroom, it was on my wall for so long. And we like looked, and the name of the angel was Michael.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about the New York show the event in New York and what you did?
So it's the Museum of the Moving Image in Astoria, Queens. And it is one of the foremost film preservation, culture, artifacts, exhibiting museums in the world. So it is incredibly prestigious from a motion picture film medium standpoint. And my niece, who I've been an uncle to and a mentor to since she was 18, and came into my life, she is an incredibly creative and talented director who makes VR films and AR experiences, and also, use the new Sora tool to make a short film. And she had a VR installation that was at the Museum of the Moving Image in 2023 or late 2022. And on the precipice of the 30th anniversary of her dad passing away, it was actually the 30th anniversary of virtual reality. So it was 2023. And I was talking to her and I said, one of the ways that we could really memorialize your dad is if we got the film inducted into the National Archive or the National Registry. Like they pick a select number of films that are culturally relevant, and they basically catalog them and they deem them works that are worthy of, being in this institution. And she's like, well, how do we do that? And I was like, well, we got to, start to get his name in the zeitgeist. And, if you look up Mike Ternasky in general, like now you kind of can find stuff. You'll find a lot of stuff of me talking about him, maybe a few quotes or, a rare photograph here and there. But I really wanted to screen the Plan B trilogy. And I said to Michaela, I really want to find a museum. I remember exactly where we were when we were having this conversation. I was dropping her off at a friend's house in Glendale. And I was like, yeah, I really would just love to screen the trilogy. If we screen it in a museum, it just sort of helps elevate the conversation, rightfully so. And she said, well, I have these friends at the Museum of the Moving Image. Maybe I could present it to them. And I was like, that's cool. And she was like, let's put a proposal together and I'll pitch it to Moni and the relationship that I have there. So her and I, she's great. She's, like a producer, like for better or worse, I need that sort of structure when it comes to these creative endeavors. But I was riding up a storm, collecting imagery, and she's building this deck. And she took this deck and pitched it, and it was all around Plan B and the Plan B trilogy and Mike Ternasky. They came back to us like within the month, and the curator from the museum, Barbara Miller, was like, we love this idea for an exhibit, but we really think we should expand it to the 90s and the rise of street style skateboard videos. Would you guys still be interested in co-organizing, co-curating it with us if we changed it. Mike Ternasky will still be a centerpiece, but we'll do it. And Michaela and I just had a real heart-to-heart about it. And ultimately, like, it was about honoring her father and helping her step into his legacy and her having a fingerprint on the exhibit. And we were like, yeah, we'll do it. Right around the same time that I was working feverishly on the book, and then right around the 30th anniversary of Mike dying, it all kind of came together. And, Michaela is a designer, and she worked with this woman, Denai, who's the designer of the exhibit. And, Michaela's a custodian for a lot of her father's artifacts. And, so it was like, she's kind of producing it, not kind of, she's keeping everyone on task and making sure everything gets done, cracking the whip. And then she's helping design it. And then, she's advocating for me in the exhibit. I don't like yell too loudly about myself. And there's a really incredible story of mentorship that I think is important in that. And then we worked towards this really incredible exhibit where we showcase about 12 videos from that era. And we had a premiere of virtual reality in September, screening it again in person, and Rick Howard came for that. And it's really an unprecedented exhibit. I worked emotionally as hard as I've worked on anything, like collecting all these artifacts from all these skateboard filmmakers. Because what my dream was to see a videotape box in a museum with a placard that identified the year and the maker and the brand and what it was. And, my intuition was to make sure all the videotapes come from a collector or someone who's a steward in the culture, a custodian. So we went to Brendan Spohn with Secret Tape. He provided all those. The decks on the wall, those are from Tim Anderson at Decade. All the magazines that are in there are from Look Back. And, it was really an extraordinary gift and super emotional. And I'm so fucking stoked about the shit that I was able to procure for it. And ultimately, like, that opening night was extraordinary. So that's another long-winded answer.
No.
About it.
So, because you mentioned in our last interview that one of your goals was to get Mike and the videos into the National Registry.
Yeah.
So how far into that process does this event help you? Does it help you get there?
I don't know. We were absolutely consumed with the exhibit, and that opening night and the process of making the exhibit during that time of memorializing Mike's passing was really overwhelming for all of us. So I think we're all taking a little bit of a deep breath right now. And we're looking at whether the exhibit can travel. And I think we'll revisit the National Archive and National Registry stuff and look at where that standing is. But, we had an official screening of virtual reality on their screen. That's like, you publish it in a newspaper that this happened. And,
oh, wow. Okay.
Cool. It was incredible. But we had a conversation. And since we've talked, I finished the book and had this museum exhibit.
Where can we get the book? And you have a show coming up in LA, correct?
Yeah.
That people can RSVP for?
Yeah. Yeah. I have an opening at Heavyweight Gallery on Spalding next Friday, November 22nd. And it's beautiful because that's my childhood friend. Addison Liu is the co-owner with Tyler Gibney. And so we'll have some special guests there. I'll have a ton of photos from the book and other outtakes and stuff that people have never seen. We'll have copies of the book there to purchase. But the primary place to buy the book is just on my website, which is jacobrosenberg.tv/shop. Yeah, the show opens on Friday and then extends it will be open for the rest of the year. So,
oh, wow. Okay.
You can go and check it out.
That's amazing.
Yeah, a lot of cool stuff will be there. Awesome.
All right, dude. I love you. I wish you the best with the book.
Thank you.
I can't wait. I'm glad this is behind you, and now you can try like another project or make your movie or whatever you're going to do.
Yeah, I think there's something on that level next that I need to do. But this feels really good. And self-publishing is like, as hard as it will be to do fulfillment myself, I know you know this. It's like really gratifying to know that you're like tethered to the people who really want it. And
Yeah.
that's like really beautiful. And I can throw little notes in there and stuff like that. And I think my mom is going to come down and help me, which is amazing. And
Yeah, it's fun packing boxes when it's your shit,
yeah,
you know, and you made
right.
it
Yeah.
and you know who's ordering it, or
Yeah.
you at least feel connected to the skater ordering it, even if you don't
Totally.
know them, you know. So
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the feeling
But,
that somebody's paying for your thing is an
yeah,
amazing
that's
feeling.
that's insane. I mean, the pre-orders have been really strong, and I just am like, it's amazing. So
Cool.